This regular City Council meeting of Medicine Hat, dated November 4th, 2024, is called to order at 6:30 p.m. We will begin with a moment for prayer or reflection. The City of Medicine Hat acknowledges that we live and work on treaty territory. The city pays respects to all Indigenous people and honors their past, present, and future. We recognize and respect their cultural heritages and relationships to the land. So item 5, adoption of previous council meeting minutes. We have 5.1, organizational meeting minutes dated October 21st, 2024. Are there any additions or objections to those minutes? I think that's on the regular council. Oh, okay, so I apologize. There have been some changes made, so you go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So under appointment of council members, it should reflect 8 for and 1 against in the first motion under 2, and the subsequent motion is 9 and 0 against.
Councillor Van Dyke?
Yes, thank you through the chair. Very minor thing under council member reports. I believe it should say the 7 over 70 awards rather than 7 under 70.
Thank you. Any other clarifications or objections? All right, seeing no further objections, council will adopt the minutes of the October 21st, 2024 organizational meeting as amended. Moving on to regular council meeting minutes, October 21st, 2024. Any concerns or objections? All right. Seeing none, council adopts the minutes of the October 21st, 2024 regular city council meeting as presented. Moving on to the adoption of the agenda. Are there any additions or objections to the agenda? Seeing none, council adopts the agenda of the November 4th, 2024 regular city council meeting as presented. Are there any councillor announcements today? Councillor Robbins.
Yes, thank you. And through the chair, I just wanted to say, oh, turn that off. Congratulations to the communications department and fleet management for the Name the Fleet competition. All of the people who put in the most creative names for the graders and standers, they were all adorable, and I know the winners were announced, and I saw it extensively through communications from the city, so great job to the communications department, and I look forward to seeing the newly named, sooner rather than sooner in the winter to stave off just a little bit longer, but I thought it was adorable and the names are very cute. So if you haven't checked out the newly named equipment, you really should, because they're, I did go through with my kids and they really liked Snowy One Kenobi, I think was the highlight for them. And Taylor Drift was also a big hit. So very creative, and thanks for giving us something to laugh at City Council table. We don't get a lot of that.
All right, any more councillor announcements? Seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Does anyone want to pull any items from the consent agenda for discussion tonight? Seeing none, can I get a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept the consent agenda.
I will second that motion.
Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll vote.
I vote yes.
Thank you, Councillor Sharps. Can you also please, when this comes down just for, I missed making you show your face per our procedure bylaw. Thank you very much. Okay, so we have 2 delegations today. The first up is Medicine Hat Women's Shelter Society Family Violence Prevention Month. And with us, we have Natasha Carvalho, Executive Director, and Ryan Thorburn, Board President, and they will be providing a presentation. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. Oh, it's already working. Thank you so much. Can you hear me? This mic?
The mic, oh, there, I think it turned on.
This one? Oh, sorry. Thank you so much for having us here today. We just wanted to touch base with you like we do every year, just to let you know what we're doing with Family Violence Prevention Month and some highlights that have been going on throughout business as usual. So we did our declaration signing on Friday with Mayor Clark, and we had a great memorial walk. Thank you to all of you who were able to join us on that day. The downtown looks lovely with purple ribbons, and hopefully it's creating some good conversations with people. As you can see from the slide, I don't think you have a copy of the PowerPoint, but you will get one, I believe. We have a whole bunch of events going on, so I don't really want to go through all of them because you can read them all. But some highlights are we're going to be at the Tigers game for Chuckapuck and for Community Corner coming up, and we're doing some events at the library. We'll be downtown at Midnight Madness. So there's a lot of things that we do during this month just to kind of keep the awareness and everything going. Here we go. Just in a nutshell, the Medicine Hat Women's Shelter Society, to remind you, we run 24/7 support. So that's a helpline, a text line, and a web chat line. We have 2 shelters, an emergency shelter and a second stage shelter. Our second stage shelter is the only shelter south of Calgary, so it does keep us very busy. It's a big catchment area for that. Outreach services, which is part of our SFIT program with the police service, as well as we do a lot of work with children and youth because we really want to focus on breaking the cycle and trying to get some things happening for those young kids who we know have been impacted with that. Another big point of work that we do is community education and awareness. Peggy Ravel, who is with me here tonight, over there, does a lot of work in the community with schools and service clubs and different organizations like that to just bring awareness to the issue of family violence. Some of our numbers from last year, as you can see, we were really busy. We had over 1,100 people come through all our various programs. If you notice, the biggest thing I always like to highlight is the children that we served. We had 250 children come through the various programs and services. So that's whether they're in shelter, second stage shelter, or coming through our outreach programs. It's a lot of kids who've been impacted by family violence in our community. So really happy to be able to provide the supports for them. Really what we were here to talk to you about too, as well as our capital campaign. So thank you, Mayor Clark, members of council, City Manager Mitchell, and Managing Directors for letting us be here today. I'm here with my Board President, Ryan Thorburn, as well as we have our Board of Directors with us in the gallery. Typically at this time of year, we're really happy to present to you all our accomplishments at the Medicine Hat Women's Shelter Society from the past year. We like to highlight all our innovative programs and share the service stats, which we've done. But we're really just facing a bit more of an urgent matter, and so we just wanted to come back and talk to you about it. If you remember last year when we presented, we said that we weren't here to ask you for anything, that we would go away and do some work and come back and let you know where we're at. So if you remember last year, we launched a capital campaign. That was in September of 2023 at our AGM. It's an $8.5 million project. We have $2 million of that already committed, so our fundraising goal is $6.5 million. So it's a big project. Construction isn't cheap to do. And we began construction last November. So it's already been a year since we started the construction. So during that time, we managed on site till about February. And then in February, we had to move everybody out of the shelter because of upgrades to our fire suppression system. So we moved all the clients off site to a hotel with staff to support them. And they were there for about 7 months. So a little dicey, but it worked. It worked well to keep them safe, but it wasn't obviously ideal. We have them back now, and they're sharing with the second stage shelter, so it's a little tight, but we're making it work. When we started the project, we were quite optimistic about being able to secure funding. We were hopeful, and we had started having a lot of conversations. We were really optimistic about garnering additional support at a provincial and federal level, but regrettably, I have to tell you, we just aren't there yet. We haven't really achieved those financial goals. We have persistent outreach out to government officials at the provincial level. We've had requests for support go out. We've sent letters of endorsement from MP Motts, MLA Wright, Chief Murphy, yourself, Mayor Clark, but we're still struggling with receiving the assistance that we need from the provincial government. We remain hopeful that with continued advocacy, we can be successful, and we do have a meeting and a tour planned for 2 weeks from today, November 15th, with Minister Turton. He's the Minister of Child and Family Services, which is our core funder for the shelter at a provincial level. So we're hoping to have some fruitful conversations with him at that time. But I know that they're going to come at us and ask us what sort of support we're receiving at a municipal level. So that's sort of where we've been having some conversations. And we'd like to come to you about that as well. We have been in discussions with Cypress County, and they have committed to providing a substantial donation for us for the upcoming year, so we're really thrilled about that. We do serve Medicine Hat and surrounding areas, so we do support some of Cypress County as well. We do have some commitments from businesses and local service clubs who have come forth and have been very keen to support us and make some donations towards that, so we're really, really happy about that. And we understand that these are challenging times with many organizations competing for limited funding. However, we would urge you to view our shelter through a community lens. It's not just a facility, but a vital sanctuary for all individuals and all their children to escape violence and hardship, to provide essential supports to those most vulnerable in our community. This is actually our 10th year of the SFIT partnership with the Medicine Hat Police Service. I just had some videos come up that we were looking at it. So when then Chief McGrogan and I decided to begin this program, it was due to a tragedy. We'd had a horrific murder-suicide that happened in our community, and we really recognized that we had to do services differently, and we really came together to figure out what would be a better way to get on top of it and do some preventative work and ensure that we were getting to people in a timely way so that tragedies didn't happen. At that time, Medicine Hat Police Service was receiving up to 500 calls a year in terms of domestic violence, and that felt like really a lot of calls, and we thought this would be a great time to start the program. So we've been working away for 10 years now and growing that program, and we have more staff, and we're still really working hard, but police calls are almost at 1,000 this year. So we know that the need is still there, and we know that domestic violence still continues to happen, and so that's part of really why we just felt we as an organization had to make some plans for the future and for a longer term. This year alone, as I said, we had over 1,100 people come through the shelter, and there was a night in June, I was somewhere, I don't know where, it was a beautiful sunny night, and then all our numbers were coming in, and there were 32 kids in shelter that night. 32 kids. When your kids are out having fun in the summertime, 32 of them are hiding out at the shelter, and I thought we have to be able to provide these services and make sure that these kids are getting what they need to break some of this cycle so that we don't keep having this continue. So we'd like to advise council, so we're waiting for the nonprofit capital grant process to be completed so that we can make a formal request to council. So you will be expecting to see a request coming forth once that process is confirmed. We are hoping to ask you for 33% of the total global budget per that process. So we're just waiting for that to be finalized, and then once it is finalized, hopefully by the end of the year, you would have that in front of you, and we could maybe have some more conversations. So I don't know what that looks like, if that would be a 2-year with your budget or anything like that, but we're just waiting for that process to be finalized. We have met with city staff and corporate services to begin that process, so we're just waiting on the next step for that. So we didn't come to this decision lightly, and I just want you to understand, like, we didn't just decide we needed a new shiny building. We really it was more of a really, not a want, but more of a need to. It was a 25-year-old building. It's used 24/7. It's a beautiful space, and it was designed purposely as a shelter, but it just takes a lot of wear and tear, and it was built for 11 beds, meaning 11 people can sleep there on a given night. But since that time, I've been at that shelter 18 years coming up next month. So when we started, it was 11 beds. Now we're 30 beds in that same physical blueprint. And those of you who've been there can remember what size it is and how tight it is and how much it's hard to do the work you need to do to support people in a proper way. So we needed to bring it up to code for fire suppression. We only had one accessible bedroom, and that bedroom filled up really fast. Our laundry facilities, education room, daycare were all in the basement because we had sort of just made everything fit into that space, and it's not ideal. So as you can appreciate, the truth of it is clients come to our shelter because they're hurt. They've been severely beat up sometimes, and they can't manage stairs. They can't manage to kind of get around very easily. So we need to be able to provide to them a space that's dignified, that respects what they've been going to, give them a place to heal from that trauma, and just make sure they can manage with their children while they're there. So that's part of what we'd like to do. We put bathrooms into the bedrooms so that moms can just bathe their kids at night. That's all they want to do. Nothing huge, but those are kind of things that we just really wanted to make sure that we're there in that space. So I guess I would just like to say investing in our shelter is an investment in social justice. By ensuring that individuals and their children have access to safe shelter, we can empower them to reclaim their lives, pursue education, contribute positively to society. This aligns with the broader community goals set out by the city yourselves of recognizing that the success of our city's most vulnerable is a critical measure of our success as a community. We also feel that our ask or our project aligns with your priority number 2. You just set it out by council, which was about building a resilient and inclusive community. We look forward to being able to collaborate with you to lead this provincial, municipal, community urgent response that you've been talking about with social disorder. Family violence is a social disorder. Its ramifications are huge. The long-term outcomes, we're now seeing people come to the shelter who were kids in the shelter. And while I'm happy that they know that there's a safe place to go, it breaks my heart that the cycle is still continuing. So there's lots of work to be done, and we need to be able to be here for the long term. So I heard the Premier was looking for forward-thinking community projects, so here we are, we're ready to do it. So we'd just like you to thank you for that. Thank you for securing a sustainable future for the shelter. You are helping us to grow hope in the community, and that's really our ultimate goal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor McGrogan?
Thank you. I take it you're available for a question or two?
Yes, of course.
All right, thank you. So thanks for the presentation. As you know, it's always, you're so knowledgeable in all of this. You've been in for like the cornerstone for a number of years at the shelter, and I sure appreciate you. I'm curious about the clients and then the ratios. So I'm just wondering, you might not have the numbers now, but as you said, you will be back. I would really like to hear how many local clients we have in a ratio versus county clients versus provincial ones that have come in from other places. And
Sure.
you may have those numbers now, but I wouldn't
Yeah.
expect that you would. But it would be really good to see that,
Sure. I'll
to
make
see
sure we
those
get
numbers.
those.
Thank you.
Through the chair, thanks, Councillor McGrogan. I don't have it broken down for you, but I can speak to the fact that at the second stage shelter, a lot of those people are often from out of town because we're the only second stage south of Calgary, so sometimes they are looking to relocate to a new place because of safety issues and needing a longer term stay. But primarily our emergency shelter people are local, but I will start catching those numbers to make sure that you can see the difference.
That's a really good point, I guess, in terms of, maybe applying regionally on some of these things, because, if you need the service, you need the service, and we're not gonna turn people away. So, Councillor Knodel, I said we,
Yes.
but yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Clark, through the chair. So I have a comment and then just a general question. So it's often difficult to manage the vast array of requests that come forward to council, as you know. But when we have you in front of us, it's very, in my perspective, it's easy to prioritize when you see the efforts of an organization being associated with survival, and that's what I see underpinning the work that you do is, of course, there's a lighter level beyond just survival, as you talk about making sure families are connected and they get to bathe their children. Like, these are, to me, and last time you were here, we talked about your marketing campaign having Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I see that truly being essential, as an essential understanding as we as a group make decisions about who gets funding. Not to say that other organizations aren't important, which they absolutely are. We need arts and culture, we need sports, we need that vast array, because humans aren't just the bottom, they are a pyramid of needs. But every time you speak, I just remember that we can't function as a community if we are not taking care of those absolute basic needs. And to me, it resonates as that. So thank you for being an advocate for that, first and foremost.
Thank you.
Public awareness question. So what does the future of our community look like without community municipal support as well as charitable donations? So what happens if we don't show up for you?
Sorry, that's a big one. We consider ourselves to be an essential service. We serve the community of Medicine Hat. We had 1,100 people through our door last year. I don't know where I would send them if we couldn't keep operating. I'm not saying that's where we're at now by any means, but if that was a longer term problem, that is our concern, right? We do have another shelter in town, which is the Mustard Seed, but children can't go to the Mustard Seed. And so that's why we end up actually with a lot of families who end up in our shelter sometime who have different needs because of the, being with their kids and things like that. And so we are a charity. We've always relied on fundraising and donations. Part of our struggle is that we haven't had an operational increase from our provincial government, which is our core funder, in over 10 years. And so we're struggling with some of that because that fundraising gap keeps getting bigger and bigger and impacts our services. And so did we want to start a capital campaign in the middle of all this? Not necessarily, but it's not getting any cheaper to build buildings, and we needed to do it for the long term. We needed to be here for the long term. We needed to have a space that, it wasn't about increasing capacity, it's more just about accessibility and functionality more than anything. We will have the ability to have more spaces if we need to, but so I guess to you, I would say I'm not sure what we would do. Councillor Canodal, that's sort of how we operate. We rely on the community for services. We always have a great, that part of, one of the spaces we're building in the shelter is a place to receive donations, and that's because we get so many great donations from the community in terms of in-kind donations, and people want to give us stuff for our families, and it's wonderful. We've never had space to be able to store them and process them, and so part of our build was like, let's have a space for that so we can receive that, because we do rely on that very heavily. Like right now, we rely on actually donations from the food bank to offset some of our food costs, because that keeps growing, but we don't have a budget that keeps growing with that. So we are very creative in how we figure out how to make things work. So we would hope it wouldn't come to those kind of things, but I don't know if I answered that enough. Thank you.
Go ahead, yes.
Just a quick follow-up through Mayor Clark. I'm asking this not because I think it's important to be dark and to be negative, but I just want it to be said that without help, you can't do the work that you're doing, and the work that you're doing is important. So that's why I know that it's kind of of course, you can't predict the future. No. It wouldn't be a good thing if we don't have the community show up for you. So
yeah, I'd love to be out of a job, to be honest with you. I'd love to be able to say to you, guess what? I'm shutting down the shelter. We've nailed that problem. On to the next. But no, sadly. So that's where I just feel like we have to have space where people can come and we can do the programming that we want to do to provide the supports people need to be able to flip this in some way.
Thank you. Final statement. I'm glad to hear that there's you're creating a space where donations or the way that people can show up and offer what they can offer is a work in progress. I guess my last question is, what are ways that the average person can contribute if it's not financially?
Their time is amazing. Like, we have quite a volunteer pool at the shelter, which helps us offset a lot of programming in terms of, I think works out to like 2 full-time staff a year, the amount of volunteer time that we use. And that's sorting donations, helping in the childcare, helping us cook meals, doing front reception, like helping with special events. There's so many ways that people can help. And a lot of times that's what people have to give is time. So we'll take the time for sure as well.
Counselor Sharps?
Hi, thank you. And through the chair, thank you for the presentation. I do appreciate that. I did have a couple of questions for you, Director or Executive Director, and then I had one for administration. And the first one is, I couldn't see it on my screen, so I apologize if you did have the number up. But when you said there was requirements for about 33%, what does that equate to? What does that 33% equate to?
Our global budget is through the chair, Councillor Sharps, our global budget is $8.5 million for the project. 33% would be about 2.8.
All right, thank you. Sorry, I don't have a copy. I don't know if we have a copy of the presentation, but I don't have it, so I couldn't do those numbers. So I apologize. So 2.8. Okay. So can you tell me what other municipalities do? This might be a loaded question, but do you have an idea of what other municipalities do in relation to helping funding this particular item, like shelters and women's shelters and needs like this?
Like what other shelters do in other areas of our
No,
community?
like so City of Calgary, things like that. Does the City of Calgary provide additional funding to the local women's shelter?
I'm not sure of all the other shelters, Councillor Sharps, but I do know that in Red Deer, they have had a commitment from the City of Red Deer to help support their shelter, similarly recognizing it as almost, if you will, a municipal mandate that these are people in their community who they need to help and keep safe. So there are some shelters who have been helped by the city. I don't know enough about who and what, but I can find that out.
It would just
decision.
for sure, it would be interesting. It was interesting. So I'm up at RMA in Edmonton, and I just had a conversation with several members of council from Cypress County, and they're very quite proud. It's a little over $250,000 they're donating or committing to your shelter. So proud to be a regional partner with them for sure. But man, did they put that number out there pretty quick, so we knew it. So good for them, and congratulations on that funding, and hopefully we can do something, which brings me to my question for administration. Where are we, through the chair to city manager, where are we on the capital project funding model proposition?
City Manager Mitchell?
Thank you. Through the chair, the capital funding model, framework model is in place, and the women's shelter is putting their application through. Is that specific enough? If you want more information about the model itself, I can turn it over to Brian Stouth, who's on the line.
No, I'm actually, thank you very much for that. No, I'm actually okay for now. I guess, I mean, I would like more information, potentially in a different meeting, however, but that's good to know that. So if I'm hearing you correctly, City Manager, community groups can now start to make application for capital projects through this funding model.
Follow? Through the chair, yes, they can, and this has gone through several different committees, and I believe the information was in council's package, but we can certainly bring that back. Thank you.
That'd be awesome. Yeah, I definitely don't recall the model being presented in its entirety. So I would love to see that. Thank you. I appreciate those answers.
Counselor Hyder?
Thank you, and through the chair. Thank you to my friend Natasha for the presentation tonight. You know I'm a supporter, and I'd like to congratulate you. We were talking, you've been doing this a long time, my friend, and there's no one else that should be at the helm of this project. So even though it's, like you said, if you were out of a job, you'd be happy, but there's no one else that can suit this, so well done. Just a question for people that might be online or listening. I understand what emergency shelter is, and that's where the money needs to go for the campaign. Can you just explain to us what second stage shelter is? Because sometimes people don't understand what that could be.
Sure. Yeah, so our second stage was built in 2006. It's the only second stage south of Calgary. Our model is that it is a row of townhouses, so they're two-story, three-bedroom townhouses, plus one is an accessible unit that's attached to the admin building, which is offices, group space, laundry, and things like that. So the second stage would be sort of just that. What it means is the second sort of stage of after you've been in the emergency shelter and you need some more time. So technically, we're mandated by the government to give you 3 weeks in the emergency shelter. So I don't know about you, but 3 weeks goes like that, especially when you're in crisis. So those stays are becoming longer and longer. Also, just on that note, due to not a lot of housing availability options for families, we're keeping them a lot longer in shelter as well. But so the great thing about the second stage program is that it's housing combined with shelter programming. So while you live at that program, you can live there for up to a year. Most people stay about 9 months. Some people stay longer. It just depends on your circumstances. And usually when you sort of come in, if you have kids and they're in school, you don't want to pull them out to move. So, we just let things sort of ride out like that. So you can live there for up to a year and participate in programming. So every day we have different groups, parenting groups, boundary groups, living through family violence groups, self-care groups, all different kinds of things like that. We have a lot of guest speakers who come in from the community. You can also meet with your worker one-on-one to work on your safety planning and sort of your goals and what you want to do. Most women at that point in time are sort of thinking about the future and sort of where they want to go and what they want to do to sort of get back on their feet and maybe make a go of doing it on their own as a single parent. So we have a great partnership with the college, which provides bursaries to our families. They need them. Sometimes they just need to upgrade. Sometimes it's just one course and maybe then you could be a healthcare aide and that might be the differences of something else. And then maybe you feel like you could get back on your feet and provide for your family, because we know that one of the biggest barriers is that women return to a violent situation because they just can't make it on their own. So that gives them that time and space. And we always say it gives them that sort of time to breathe and kind of catch their breath and figure out what they want to do. And they have their own space and it's just their own with a door that locks. And we have a great partnership with the root cellar and they fill all the cupboards and pantries and fridges with food when they first move in. So they're stocked up. And it's just a great space to sort of be able to be there with your kids and heal from everything that you've gone through and make some plans to go forward. And kids register for school and they get back into their routine so that they live there for the whole time. So we're generally pretty busy there. Being the only second stage, we get a lot of requests for people to come in and use that. But it's great success with it because that gives you enough time to sort of figure out your plans and get established and sort of heal from some of that trauma and then go out on your own. We partner with community housing to get them hooked up to housing, get them into school, help them find, register for doctors and all those kinds of things, and they can get back into community.
Thank you, Natasha. Just a question. If it were possible, would there be an opportunity for members of council to possibly come have a look at what is happening with the construction and things like that?
We would love that, for sure.
And
Yeah,
then
that
get
would be
a little
wonderful.
visual on.
Yeah.
I didn't
sometimes-
know on protection of people, so if we could maybe.
Yeah, for sure. I would be happy to arrange
Okay.
that. So yeah, absolutely. Sometimes it helps you to have a visual of sort of what it could be and what it could look
Yeah,
like. So,
absolutely.
yeah,
Okay.
we would love that.
Thank you. Thanks, Anne.
I kind of wanted to follow up on Councillor Knodl's question about the impacts. Maybe you could just, through examples or however, like what are some of the families facing and the impact that it could have on children or the spouse that's in, or partner that's in the abusive relationship? Like what, I think, as we discussed, it's through talking to you, I've kind of like had more of a realization of how intense some of these situations can be, and that death is a possibility and brain injury is a possibility, and repeated relationship dynamics is a possibility. So do you mind commenting on that?
No.
Okay.
Thank you. A lot of what we see lately, especially, is that our clients are hurting more and going through more things out there than I feel like when we first started. I think the police would agree too, that they're seeing clients' needs in a whole different way. And I think there's a lot of dynamic kind of things happening on in families. And so for us, really what we're seeing is that people coming in who are quite injured, who have been strangled. Strangulation is really high in terms of family violence. It's like something like 42% of women across the province report that they've been strangled in an intimate partner relationship. And so strangling is not just strangling. Strangling leads to concussion, which leads to brain damage, which leads to a lot of things. And so people getting back on their feet are struggling with a lot of extra barriers than they used to be. And for the kids, I think that who are living through those kind of things, I always say, you know, kids didn't choose to be in that family. That's just where they landed. So that's on us then. That's our responsibility as citizens to make sure we're taking care of them and protecting them and teaching them skills that they need to be able to get through some of that and navigate some of those things that they've experienced as well. And we see a lot of kids who come through the shelter who don't even speak. They're like 3 or 4 years old and they are just not verbal. And as you know, that's not right. And after they've been with us a while, it's like they've found their words because they're safe, and then they can start speaking and they feel comfortable, and you can just see the changes. And so moms will report that kind of change in behavior within the first little bit after they've lived with us, especially at the second stage where, you know, they've been there for quite a while and sort of getting back into that safety, feeling safe again. And so I think for us, it feels like this is the work that is so important to us, and this is why we feel like we can't take it lightly, because we're walking this journey with people at their most vulnerable. We're the ones who are with them. We're the ones who get to be a witness to what they're going through, and we're the ones who hear all these stories. And, you know, for staff, it's a heavy burden, but it's also such a privilege because they're at such a state and they're choosing to come to us. I always say the shelter is voluntary. You don't have to come there, but if you do come there, we're happy to be here for you, and we want to support you through what we can to make sure that you can come and have some success, right? We always say to people, like, there but for the grace of God go I. It could happen to anybody, and probably look at the number of people who are in this room today. Most of us know somebody who's experiencing family violence if we're not experiencing it ourselves. It's obviously quite prevalent in our community if our police calls are that high and everybody's that busy. And so I think that a lot of what we're seeing is not going away, and we need to be able to do what we can do at the shelter. So when we meet with clients, we talk about safety plans and how they can protect themselves if they're staying in their relationship and keep themselves safe. We don't expect people to leave if that's not what they want to do, but we want to keep themselves safe, right? So that's an example of something like that. Or we're hooking up with brain injury learning, like I said, and you know, to sort of help them support about navigating those next steps of what that means now as a mom with a concussion and dealing with post-concussion stuff, trying to raise a family on your own as a single mom. What does that look like? So there's a lot of different pieces that factor into those kind of things. And I think that, like we always say, like, I don't want to blame COVID for everything, but I blame it for a lot. And I think that after COVID, we didn't get to hit reset and start again. And here we are, people are still kind of struggling and not coming out of some of those things that they experienced. Like during COVID, all our kids came home to the shelter. That place, school was a safe place for them. They loved school. School meant routine, and school meant a hot lunch, and school meant they saw their friends and somebody saw them, and all of a sudden they were sent home and violence escalated, right? And I think violence escalated during COVID, and we've never really seen it drop since then. We used to kind of have patterns where we had a break every now and then, and now it just feels steady. And the police will say that too, that since COVID, it continues, correct? Right?
Very, very similar numbers.
Yeah, so that's really, I don't know if I answered all of that, but that is really what we're seeing, is that there's such a complexity of issues for what people are going through. And I think it's our duty as citizens and as just human beings to provide a safe space for them.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Would you mind, I'm not sure that the mic picked up your comment.
I just said our numbers are holding strong since COVID. They should be
Oh.
over 1,000 probably by January.
Wow. Thank you very much. I don't see any more questions on behalf of council. I want to thank you for all the work that you do, and I know, like you said, it's a hard thing to do, but I do hope that it's also a blessing. Councillor Sharps, I guess, has one more question.
I do, sorry, Mayor Clark, and it's actually not for the women's shelter, but it is for administration. So I was just looking at the meeting minutes from April 8th, where we granted an extension for the grant criteria to come back to council to the regular, to Q3 of 2024. So I don't think I've missed a meeting. Has it come back to council?
City Manager Mitchell?
Yeah, through the chair. No, I don't believe so. I was not referring to council meetings. I was referring to committee meetings. So we will get that information for you and we will follow up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So does it come back to council or is it just going to be in committee? Just so I know and I can put it in my follow-up.
I can't answer that, Councillor Sharps, right at this moment, but I will let you know.
If the meeting minutes that you're referring to say that it's going to come back to council in Q3 of 2024, then it needs to come back to council.
That's what it says. Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you. All right, we look forward to working with you on a continuing basis.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
very much.
Next up, we have our second presentation. Is the Medicine Hat Exhibition and Stampede Revitalization Project. So this, we've heard some about this before, and it's back here again. We're not here to make any decisions, just receive this presentation for information and go from there. City Manager, good evening, Ron, Mr. Edwards. City Manager Mitchell would like to introduce this topic, and then it'll be over to you.
Thank you through the chair, and thank you for coming back. And I can't even remember the dates when you were first here, Mr. Edwards, but we appreciate the work that you've done, and we will turn it over to you for your presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Good evening, Mayor Clark, members of council. I believe it was October 23rd of last year that we were here, and we made our presentation to you. At that time, you had asked us, and we met with Mr. Stealth of Brian, and he had quite a few questions for us, and he asked us to go back out and find answers to those questions. We felt the questions were really very important. We sought out some help from a company called Sericon to help us get to those answers, that we could give them to you and that they would mean something. So we've done that. I would like to introduce to you Mr. Bob Burton, I'm sorry, from Sericon, and Bob will make a presentation to you. Following that, our president-elect and soon-to-be president, Lori Salicki, will make a concluding remark. And then in the presence of technical questions, I have with us Kenzie Lifeso from Sunwise Engineering, who has done all the costing on this project, the engineering and architectural design. So I know you'll have questions, and hopefully we have all the answers for you. So with that, before I go and get Mr. Burton to carry on, I'd just like to thank our supporters here. I have our president here, the board members, we have shareholders here, we have volunteers here, staff members, and I would certainly like to thank you for attendance. So anyhow, with that, Mayor Clark, if I could have Mr. Burton come up and make that presentation, please. Okay.
Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Burton.
Thank you very much, and good evening, everybody. I'm assuming that this is to move this slide deck forward.
That is the hope, yes.
Yeah. Technology, as you can tell at my gray hair, it's better if it's a 17-year-old up here. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present our findings to you. I'm very cognizant of the fact you have some difficult decisions to make as council, and so hoping that we can provide some clarity on what the process is and what we found. Just to be really clear though, tonight what I want to do is I want to talk a little bit about the context, the scope, the methodology, and what we found. So in other words, what we considered, what we didn't consider, how we considered it, and then what we have found from those considerations. And then more than happy to take any questions now, and if there's something that you need additional information on, I'm happy to get that to you as well. So in terms of the Grandstand revitalization project, there's a few things we were given, the information provided to us. One was obviously the revitalization of that grandstand, which is desperately needed in terms of the construction and the issues around that. But then there was some additional considerations in terms of building the conference space and the hall. So the project cost that came in and from the engineering who's here tonight was about $38 million. $38.9 million to do all of the considerations. I think at the request of council, there was some discussion, or I can't remember who, I don't know who made the request, but there was a request to look at some different options. And so there was a second option considered where there were some revisions, and I'll go through those in a few minutes, but that came in at just under $30 million, so $29.7 million for that consideration. So the original plan really comes back to the idea of putting a commercial kitchen, large main conference room, adding breakout rooms for the site, and then having some elevators for access and concessions. Those were essentially the changes in the adaptation of that first version. When you look at the second version here, the grandstand's still in, but you can see with the coloration that you delete the banquet hall, you delete the south addition and the decks. You defer the finishes on the main floor. There's an alternate layout on the main floor as well that was considered, and then deleting the wall cladding. And that's the difference. That's that second costing that I mentioned, which brought the cost down by about $9 million. So that was the context of what we were asked to consider. From our perspective, again, Sericon, we're a management consulting firm. We're really appraisers and evaluators, and our job is really to provide an unbiased opinion. I'm not really an advocate for the project per se. I'm actually advocating my opinion about the costs, et cetera. And our job was to conduct a feasibility assessment on this project, looking at the elements. I believe that came from council in terms of what they wanted or what you wanted to look at. Providing some financial modeling, sensitivities, and scenarios analysis, looking at facility utilization requirements, what has to happen from that perspective, what a fully utilized facility looks like, capital expenditure planning, a loan repayment process, economic impacts, risk assessments, and cultural and community metrics. And then looking at some benchmarks. So that's what we were tasked with doing. And again, I come back to, hopefully, in terms of providing this, it gives you some insight in terms of the costs and benefits of the project and what it means to your city. Just a bit of context on the financials. Was mentioned earlier, there's a lot of factors a lot of things that COVID impacted. Obviously, one was the operation of the facility. So as a business evaluator, I typically like to normalize things so that it's something that we call substantively equivalent. So you can look at it and say, we're comparing apples to apples here. So when doing the financial analysis, we removed the 2020 and 2021 financial years simply because they don't reflect, we're hoping, moving forward what we see in an event center such as this. And so, but obviously history is always a fairly good indicator of what the future looks like and it has to be considered if nothing else. So we used historical cost analysis approach to say, okay, well, if this was the case and if we remove those 2 years, what does it look like? And projecting into the future. Difference really, sensitivity and scenario analysis. The sensitivity analysis is looking at some of the key cost drivers, some of the key revenue components, and saying what happens if we go 5%, 10% up and down on those. That's how sensitive are those critical elements to those cost drivers or the revenue centers. Scenario analysis is looking at, okay, let's pick a couple of known scenarios or unknown scenarios or things that we're concerned about, or running those through the model to be able to say, okay, this is what it looks like, this is what we think it would look like, what happens if? So I mentioned earlier tonight we've got 2 scenarios. One is the fully functional operational plan that was designed, and the second is the more minimal requirements that were provided. So those are 2 distinct scenarios. And in my mind, the model of any financial model has to be able to predict and look at both of those, right? And use the same approach to both so you can compare the 2 and have a look at them. I can't remember when Ron and I first talked about the economic impact, but that was certainly something that was of critical importance to the group, and so we did an economic impact study on this. We do some of our own multipliers. In this case, we use the multipliers from Stats Canada, their input-output model, mainly because when you're assessing this, when the government of Alberta is assessing these things, they want to be able to compare, as I said. So in order to be substantively equivalent, we use numbers and approaches that would be consistent with what they would see from other communities as well. So the economic impact includes your direct and your indirect and your induced impacts. I always think of direct impacts as dollars going into something, somebody spending money on something. Your indirect is that, the business-to-business type transaction, and then the induced is what happens throughout the community, how that money rolls out through the community. And then we looked at, as I said earlier, the historical operations of the facility, balance sheets, et cetera, to get an indication of what that might mean moving forward. In terms of the annualized economic impact, in 2023, the process, the event center itself, as it stood, contributed about $15.5 million to the community in direct, indirect, and induced impacts, based on the events that occurred at the center in 2023. With the investment for the first scenario, and you add the events that would be available to that scenario, that's an additional $3.9 million based on the days, et cetera. And it's in the study that I believe you have. So we talked about looking at, okay, well, if we increase the facility size, ability for the facility to operate, provide events, what does that look like? And the direct, indirect, and induced impacts are about $3.8 million.
Can I, you said that there's a report. Is that in addition to this presentation? All I can see in our agenda is the presentation.
There's a report. Ron can talk to that a bit. Our study, Ron.
It would be, if we could be provided that,
Yeah.
that would be great.
So the annualized impact, what does that mean? When I look at it from our perspective, what it's suggesting to me is that it provides a significant economic impact and boost to your economy in the city of Medicine Hat, as it stands right now. So it's not something you want to lose. Obviously, you want to try to maintain it and improve it if possible. So improving the infrastructure, when you're looking at the cost $30 million and 3.8 a year, you're looking at a capitalization rate of about 10 years in terms of the return to the community. So if it's done properly. Some of the other findings, this is nothing I don't think new to council, certainly not to your city, to the people in the city infrastructure. The working capital, let me take a step back. There's a lot of these types of facilities around the province of Alberta. Many of them are in there's significantly, there's some in financial trouble, there's some that are doing well. Yours in this city has done fairly well over the years. It's built up and accumulated a pretty good capital reserve through management. And the cash ratio, its available cash to what its liabilities are 5 times, 5.29. The revenue volatility through time at the event center is fairly stable as well. When you remove the 2 years we talked about, it's about like 10%, just under 10%. So it's not like it's going up and down and up and down. It's a very stable, it seems to be a fairly stable and well-run facility. The operating cash flow, when you get into operations more recently, that's where you start to see some differences, and the red dots or the red items out here are what start to concern people. You have an operating expense ratio just over 100%, and operating margin just about 0.8%, negative 0.8%, and that's in 2023. And what we're seeing there is a lot of money being spent on the facility to maintain it. So that's an operating margin is kind of nice because it includes depreciation. So you have depreciation and revenue spent on the facility that offset the operations, the earning from the facility. So from our perspective, we're looking at, well, what if you put money into the facility itself, how do those operations turn, right? And what does it look like? And when we ran the models, from our perspective, again, there's a pretty solid financial base to start from. And while that operating margin's of concern, when we looked at what we call sunk costs that occur regardless, versus the costs that are variable towards increased expenditures and increased revenue, that changes pretty dramatically with the expenditure, with a potential investment in physical infrastructure. It seems like the physical infrastructure is kind of dragging the operations down to a certain extent. So in that first scenario, building plan number 1, it's a 25-year amortization with a 0% interest rate. There's 3 components. Take a step back. You've got 3 components here. One is a loan, a grant, by the government of Alberta, matching grant from the city of Medicine Hat, and then there's this discussion around this operating this 0% financing or 0% interest loan. And when you look at the first scenario, that's about the 40% are about 40% contributions are about $5.6 million, or sorry, $15.6 million, and that grant's over $7 million. Okay, the low interest loan is over 7. In the second scenario, with the $28 million cost, you've got about a $240,000 cash repayment, because when you take that 40-40-20 model, you've got $11.9 million in Alberta government contributions, $11.9 million in your grant, and then about $5.6 million, I believe it is, for the low interest loan. So what we did, and what we were asked to do and what we did, was to look at what that means, what that $7.7 million, again, we'll go back to scenario 1, the $38 million, $39 million. What that really means is the center would have to generate an additional amount of revenue in order to pay off that loan over 25 years. And the additional amount of revenue, when you go through all of their line items, is about $615,000 a year in additional revenue in order to pay the loan off over 25 years. It's about a $300,000, call it a $300,000 loan per year. The things that change, of course, there's a big shift in insurance costs. There's a big shift in wage because you're putting on more events, so there has to be a contribution to wages. But many of the expenses that they currently see are actually sunk, so it's not going to change. So adding those additional events don't really cost them more, and there's no additional cost. You're not like you're sinking a bunch of costs and making zero margin on them. So that's the one analysis. The second analysis, this is how we came up with that. You're looking at the 2023 total revenue, and that's at $615,000, or a 16% increase in total revenue, in order to meet and, in our estimation, meet and cover the low interest or the zero interest loan over 25 years. We ran some sensitivities on that. Surprise, surprise, if you can increase the value of the daily rates, you get more money, and if you decrease it, you get less. But what was important here was that the high and medium low demands, we ran those to see, because essentially inflation takes care of some of the when you have a zero interest loan and you have 2% inflation over time, it takes care of that. So we were looking to see how many years it would take to pay off the loan, considering inflation. So we ran some scenarios and sensitivity analysis on that as well, just to see the viability of the process. A couple of weeks back, we were given the second scenario to look at, and that's now you need a no interest loan of $5.9 million. In order to generate that, you need an additional $538,000 a year to get the annual payment to pay that off over 25 years. And so that's a 14% increase in your gross revenue in order to pay that off. What I will say with that whole scenario is it's a bit more challenging, because you also have fewer days with which to use the facility. In the first scenario, you've got some indoor space, you're using it 365 days of the year. In the second scenario, you're not able to do that, so you really are relying, I think it took about 400 event days versus 290 event days to pay off, to generate that revenue, because you're not generating the same kind of revenue in that sense. with that second scenario building.
Can I ask as well, when you're talking about event days, the comparison is just that building versus if it was a new building? It doesn't include the rest of, like, their operations?
Good question, Mayor. I was looking at both. Actually, we were looking to see what impact it has on the operations of the facility, the total facility. But yes, when we look at event days, we're looking at the event days for the new facility, the new running facility, if that's what you're asking.
It is, because there are other buildings on that site
Yep.
that they operate but are not.
That's right, yeah. So we also, we're evaluators and appraisers. I'm not an event planner. And so what we wanted to do is talk to people who put on events to say, okay, are these assumptions unrealistic, or what are the feelings out there about this? And we didn't intend, we weren't scoped to do a full marketing study of the facility. That would obviously have to be done. Once you decide you're going through it, you want to figure out how you're going to sell the additional days. So we did get some feedback from several people, 14 different people we talked with, and the feeling is there's opportunities for event space, there's a need for modernized facilities, but there's also a very, very strong feel there's a need for community input. It can't stand alone, and community involvement. Medicine Hat, as a city, needs to be working together on this. And making sure that if the public's putting money into something, that the public's getting, returns on it, obviously. And this whole idea of a longer-term marketing plan, we can tell you how many days we're talking about and what that looks like. The probabilities of those, et cetera, those become highly dependent on getting the right marketing person and the right cooperation with other event centers or other community assets, if you will. You want to leverage those as much as possible. And that came back from the people we talked with from around the province, and that's something that needs to be considered, especially concerning what's gone on in other communities around with events and event centers. So it's about governance, if you will. The things that you have got going for you, and when you look around your community, you've obviously got, I've done a ton of work in southwestern Ontario in the greenhouse industry, and you're one of the other areas in Canada that has a pretty solid base on that front. You've got aviation, energy, obviously, and other elements of agriculture. And what we were hearing is that local businesses are actually looking for smaller venues. You're not competing with Calgary here for major events. We're talking about smaller venues to host events and breakout rooms that are required in order to discuss things during events, and making sure that the facility is fitted to the community that is residing in, and not trying to build something that's either too big or too small for what you actually need here in Medicine Hat. And so that was the focus of this, and that was the focus of the scenario analysis to see whether or not, okay, if we're talking events here, you're not bringing the World Health Organization to Medicine Hat yet to do this kind of thing. Are we actually matching like to like? And that's what we were trying to do with the analysis and the scenario analysis and sensitivity analysis. So what does that mean? What we've seen in other jurisdictions, when it's been successful, there's been an oversight boards with some community representation, meaning representatives from cross-section of stakeholders that would have input on this to make sure that everything is set up as it should be and running as it should be, developing that long-term marketing plan, making sure you're able to target and go after the right events, if you will. And then strategizing with community tourism and economic development organizations that's a key, that's a critical success factor in my mind anyways, to having something like this work in a community. And building on and leveraging what you already have in place in the community. I threw this slide up. There's no that whole governance structure is something I think that has to be coordinated and organized with the stakeholders. But I know I've seen this in other organizations where you have a build committee that makes sure over a period of time that, yes, money is being allocated and spent the way it's supposed to be spent. And as that happens and as you gain the confidence in each other, then that structure changes and it goes back to the way it was once it's all in place and everybody's comfortable with it. It doesn't necessarily guarantee you that you get the events, but it does guarantee that the money is spent the way it's supposed to be spent and you get yourself the best shot at getting and putting the ore in the water, if you will. And I think that's something that's really important when you're talking significant public funding. So with that, I'll turn it over to my colleagues. I'm more than happy to take any questions, and I'm sorry I've piled through a lot of stuff, but I just also wanted to be cognizant of the fact that we could take questions afterwards as well, and if there was something I need to delve in deeper, I will be happy to do that.
Councillor Knodel?
Thank you, Mayor Clark. This question is inspired by Councillor Robbins, who brought up at one of our last conversations the concept of a staged approach of development. Now, what I'm observing in our option 1 and 2 is that there's not a build out process. It's all going to happen not in series, but kind of in totality, whether it's option 1 or option 2, but there's not a way that we could attach a smaller portion of money to the project to start here and then build out here. I'm just wondering if that conversation was brought forward or if that's still not in the ether.
Councillor Knodel, through the chair. It was discussed, however, there are physical limitations to that on site. So to build the new grandstand, which is the imminent need, we do have to restructure all the utilities going into that. And we also need the front addition to make it barrier-free, because we need to get an elevator in, we need to get access to those floors. So in phase, or the option that was presented, the second option, essentially that would be what you could phase as option 1. And then the second option would cost more, like if we did the full build out, because then we're going back into spaces to renovate them, do interior renovation. The second option really guts the buildings. Essentially, we just do the skins and the grandstand. I hope that answers it.
Thank you. Yes.
Do you have another aspect of the presentation, or are we just in questions now?
No, I was just going to do a little bit of a speaking on behalf of the board and the Stampede.
Okay, Councillor Dumanowski, do you want to ask your question now?
If I could, Your Worship, I just to get clarity, in case I'm misunderstanding it, I understand the full build cost would be around 39 million, with approximately 15.5 from the province and the city, and the remainder in loan. When I look at the chart on page 228, I see the provincial contribution at about 15, and the city's at 15, but the total for phase 2 or building plan 2 was approximately 10 million cheaper. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, you can go on with the presentation. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Clark, council members, city executive, and everyone here tonight. I just wanted to introduce myself as Lori Sedlecki, the president-elect of the Medicine Hat exhibition in Stampede, and thank you for the opportunity this evening to have us present our revitalization project. Of course, there's an old saying, those who fail to plan, plan to fail. We're committed to both the present and the future to ensure our continuous success. Our plan will continue to provide an educational, cultural, and recreational services to the Medicine Hat and the surrounding communities. We're really at a pivotal moment. to continue to deliver these educational, cultural, and recreational events that we have offered for over 137 years, we need to replace and enhance the grandstand with this new multi-use facility. This funding will support our capital needs and allow the community members to participate in and benefit from this new facility. Our events generate approximately $18 million annually to the local economy and are supported by over 500 dedicated volunteers. All our profits from our operations are reinvested back into our programs and facilities and enhancing the quality of life for our community. This request is a substantial support from the city is essential for us to sustain our ongoing commitment to serving the agricultural and urban sectors now and in the future. With a history for over 130 years of stewardship and approximately 750 event days per year, we are financially, fiscally responsible organization ready to leverage the additional funding to create a long-lasting benefit for everybody. In conclusion, we respectfully ask the City Council to support with the province the funding for this essential project. This investment will preserve our 137-year legacy, strengthen our local economy, and ensure that we can continue to provide these educational, cultural, and recreational opportunities for all. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. I have some questions, and I don't see any other speakers. Oh, Councillor Hyder.
Thank you, Mayor Clark, and through the chair. Thank you to everyone up there that has come to present. It's been a long time a-coming. I have comments and questions, but I have one specific question I just would like to ask while I'm reviewing things. What is the cost, and it's probably right in front of me, of if we just repaired the grandstand? I just can't seem to find the amount. If anyone, if it's a line item somewhere, someone.
Maybe I can answer that.
Yeah,
and I'll turn
thanks,
that
Ron.
over to, first of all, just to repair the grandstand itself, we have two grandstands involved there. So we have the north one, or the oldest grandstand, which is in the one that needs to come down. It's the wooden structure, and it needs to come down, and the grandstand has to be replaced there. The south grandstand in this complex is one that needs a lot of TLC. It's one that's been there since '79 as well. Its structure is very well, it's still good. It just needs to, a lot of TLC. It's in, we're putting a lot of money into it as well. And part of this was going to, the total cost was also to repair that as well. So what the engineers have come up with and it's basically a $30 million if we don't add the conference center, and if we don't add the kitchen, and if we don't do a lot of things to that complex. And it's $39 million approximately, I believe, to complete the project as presented, with the conference center, with the new kitchen, with seating in the grandstand, with the repairs to the south grandstand as well. Does that help?
Yeah, thanks, Ron. I'm just having my eyes are going too, Ron. Yeah, I'm just having a look here. So yeah, thanks. I'll get back to you. Thanks, Ron.
Thank you. Okay, so how did the percentage, so initially I think there was some percentage that was going to be fundraising, but it looks like now it's just a 60-20 split. Like 20% is a loan from the city, but still that's 60% of capital that we have to come up with. How is the 40-40-20 determined?
That was determined like 3.5 years ago by the province. It was determined by the table that was used to build the Lethbridge complex. And so when we went to the province said to us, yes, we will fund this project in Medicine Hat, but we would use the same table as we used in Lethbridge, 40-40-20. It wasn't ours. We would have liked to see in a lot more, but that's the one that they had to follow, and that's the one it's been like that ever since.
Thank you. And what is the actual cost of to the city of a low interest loan or a zero interest loan amortized over 25 years?
Well,
And
yeah,
maybe that's a question for Managing Director Egert if.
I believe it's pretty close to $8 or $9 million now. It keeps increasing as we go on. I remember last year it was $7.5 million, so.
I guess, I mean, for the city, there's the depreciation of the dollar as well as the opportunity costs of not being able to gain interest on that money.
A good question, and maybe I can add some insight on that if I might. Off the top of my head, the number comes around it's about $100,000, I think, over that time period, somewhere $200,000. I think we calculated at 2% per year was what it worked out to be. So I can get to I've got the analysis on that, and so don't quote me on the numbers yet, because we actually ran that, and was one of the reasons, because we were looking at it in terms of how many years it would shorten the payment. So I think we brought it down in one scenario, and there's the two scenarios now, but I think in the first scenario, it brought it down by 3 years or 4 years in terms of how fast you could pay it off. If you paid the $300,000 today equivalent every year, you paid it off, the loan off in 4 or 5 years earlier. So it would be the equivalent of 5 years worth of payments is what the city's providing on that front. But I can get you that number. I have that number, so.
Thank you. I would very much appreciate that. I also wanted to ask on the event day, like the events that you outlined, do you have reason to believe that those will be all additional events, or will those be events that are currently being held at a city facility or other private sector facilities?
Okay, you had a good question. Yes, we have 750 event days to 800 a year. And many of those events are held in the other facilities that we have on the grounds. That particular facility that we're talking about does have 45, 46 days of outside activity. And it has potential for a lot more. And I can give you an example just in that facility alone last year in 2024, we brought two major large events to that facility. In 2025, it's already booked for 3 larger events in that facility alone. The 400 and 200, I'd have to ask Bob on the increase on how much that would do on the payback side of that thing. But that facility is being used as much as we can use it, but it's limited. And as you know, all our facilities are limited up there right now, and we're getting more requests every year to hold functions that we have to try, or the staff has to try and say, how are we going to make this work? And just a short example, we have a conference coming up, a big ag conference coming up, which is double in size from last year. And one of our breakout rooms is a soccer field, 150 chairs and a stage and a PA system out on the soccer field. So we do try to use every inch of that facility, but there are times when other events are better off than some of the other ones that we hold. Does that answer your question?
It does, with respect to that you've said that there's a couple of new events, but just on a broader scale, whether or not we believe that will be increased to the community, or just kind of moving it from one location to another within the city. And then you kind of led into my next question, which was, this isn't the only building on the property that needs upkeep and is getting kind of old. Were those ongoing maintenance costs, which the Medicine Hat Stampede Board will still be responsible for, were those, and possibly on an escalating basis, as well as the maintenance of this building, so that when it's at life's end, it's that money is there. So I guess I'll leave you with those two things for now.
the facilities that are on our grounds, from my point of view, and I guess you'd have to bring more of a building and engineering in to get a full-scale report on that, but in my own estimation, we just sunk a pretty good chunk of money into what I call our pavilion. And that was $1.2 million, and we did that in 2 years ago. And it needed to be done because of the roof and the walls. The other facilities are newer. Our barn facilities are very well kept, and they've been maintained, and they're good for quite a few years. I don't foresee any major structural repairs being done in our facilities, but there's always ongoing maintenance, and it's becoming more expensive all the time. Our biggest one that we have, and we ask ourselves all the time, is how much money do we keep putting in to that grandstand facility? As you know, we just put $160,000 in it so that we could operate out of it this past year in '24. If that had not been done, we would have not been able to use that north grandstand. And the staff asked me, how much money do we keep putting into it? Well, that's why we're here tonight.
So were the other maintenance costs included?
I'm sorry?
Were the other maintenance costs, like your ongoing maintenance costs of the entire facility included?
I think I understand your question. Yes, they were. That's why we used the operating, that operating analysis we did, because that include, instead of an EBIT or earnings before amortization and depreciation, those were included. So those costs, that's why that operating number is so low, because those costs are all included in there. So what we're trying to do is, if we replace that capital or add to that capital, generate the ability to bring more revenue, what does that look like? So the answer is yes, those were included in the analysis that we provided.
Thank you. And then I understand that the province wants to say 40-40-20, but in fairness, I think, the city has a lot more risk. We've got 60% of capital that we have to come up with, and then we can't really secure the loan because we already own the land. So we do have a significant amount of risk involved. So just wondering if we could structure it all as a loan. Like the province is saying 40-40-20, but we could do it a 40-60 with the 60 being the loan.
Yes, I guess we could ask the province to do a whole lot of things. They could pay for the whole darn thing.
I mean, on our end, so instead of splitting it 40% grant, 20% no interest loan, couldn't our 40 and 20 all be a no interest loan?
I guess it could, but that would make our payback a lot more, it would be a lot harder to pay that back, let's put it that way. You see, we are open to, I guess I have to go back by what we've done in the past 130 years. And we have maintained that. We have never asked the province, well, the province has been very good with grant money that has helped us along, there's no doubt about that. But we have never asked the city for anything other than the land to maintain and to be financially responsible up there. We bring a lot of events to the city over the years, and we will continue to do that. This project alone does look at hiring one employee to actually go out and find events that we could bring into the city and bring into this complex. It needs that, there's no doubt, and that was in the costing of the payback. So can we do it? Yes. Is it going to look at the future? Yes. That's all I can tell you. We have to go back, we look at our history and what we've done, and I think we've been very successful. And we plan to be around a long time, and we need the new complex to continue doing what we're doing, and we think that we can add to that and also bring other events into the city.
Thank you. I know that was a lot of questions. Councillor Dumanowski.
Your Worship, just before I proceed, I do have comments as well, but I do have a question or two. Are we looking to have comments at this time, or are we waiting for comments, or is it mostly questions at this point?
I think mostly questions. This is just a presentation, so you can make comments if you want, but the decision on whether or not we proceed is not going to be discussed or debated tonight.
Okay. Just looking at the building plan 1 and 2, you touched on the increased revenue needs and the payback. So when I look at them and you identified a pro forma based on so many event nights, et cetera, or what level of increase needed to occur to make up those revenue differences. So when you, just to get clarity, so the rentals, for example, in building plan 1, you need rentals increased by 82%. I think it's 70-some% for the other model. Did you base that on real events that you feel you can actualize to meet those hurdle rates, or are these just the hurdle rates that you will then thereafter be command of yourself to build toward? In other words, do you have the plans, the pro forma in place to meet those rental increases? Or is that just the hurdle rate you've set for yourself and you still don't know how you're going to get there?
Councillor, through the mayor, through the chair, my work was to say these are the hurdle rates, and I think is what the question is, to say this is what you have to be able to achieve. We used the historical breakdown, so I think it averaged for when you look at all the different rates, because there are different rates for different types of events, right? And so the numbers that you saw, that the 80% and the 18% gross revenue increase, those were all based on historical performance. So that was a hurdle rate from my perspective. What made me feel more comfortable with those hurdle rates, if it's of any use to the council, is the fact that the revenue variability has been so low that I'm more comfortable saying, yeah, that's a hurdle rate. You need to do some things to go get those things, and I think from a governor's perspective, you need to get them in a way that you're not scalping them from somebody else in the community. So these are new events, but the work that we were doing was trying to say, this is what the hurdle rate is, this is what you need to achieve, and when you're bringing somebody on, this is what you're tasking them with doing. If that answers, I'm hoping I answered the question.
It did. Your worship, I believe there's perhaps someone else that wants to speak, and then I don't have comments around support or not, but I mean, I think it'd be appropriate to give some comments around the presentation tonight, and I don't know if anyone else had any questions, otherwise I'm prepared to make some comments.
There are a couple of questions. Councillor Van Dyke.
Yes, thank you through the chair. So I do have a couple of questions for the delegation regarding event days. Do you happen to know how many event days per year the grandstands are currently used? Not necessarily the halls within the stands, but the grandstands themselves.
I would have to work that. I don't have it right off my, the grandstand itself would have quickly 4, 7, 8, 9, 10. We'd have probably about 30 to 35 days of actual grandstand involvement out in the infield.
And just further...
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, and just further to that question, on those days, what percentage of, I know it probably differs for events, but what percentage of seats are sold? Is it 50% of seats, 75% of seats?
Our Friday night rodeo is sold out. The other 2 days on that rodeo are probably 2,500. The grandstand holds 4,200 between the two of them. You could break it almost in half, 2,000 and 2,000 or 2,200. We do need both grandstands to pay back the type of events that we bring in. We bring in night show events, we bring in the top caliber events of artists that you can think of. And so we need those amount of seats to do the payback. And yes, you can have less seats in the grandstand, but then you will not bring the type of entertainment that we're bringing into the city. Even our truck wagons for 4 days are using a half to 3/4 of those 4,200 seats every day for 4 days.
Okay, thank you, that's very helpful. And then I just had a comment for,
Would it be okay if I followed up on your question?
yeah, go ahead.
Just in line with that, what are the operational, like, how many months of, because it's a lot of like, the grandstands are outdoor, it's covered for the most part, but, like, it's cold in Medicine Hat. So what are the months that it would be you would potentially be able to use the grandstands for?
We use the grandstand June is our first one with Chuck Wagon Racing. June, July, August, definitely, and partially into September. But that's not to say that we don't have some really good days in May, and we are in operation in May over there, repairing and fixing, and it's just events. It's the type of events. I just had a phone call, and I can certainly open that the RCMP want to come here next year, and I need to fill the dates in next summer. So they will be here. That's an outdoor activity, and they'll be here for 2 nights. So those are the type of operations that and events that we will go after and seek. And the potential is there. The potential is definitely out there. You just need to go out and find it and bring it into Medicine Hat. But it is there, and we do get phone calls. And sometimes we have to look at what we're doing and say, can we even handle it? But the potential is definitely there, and we have a good facility. We just need to upgrade it and replace part of it.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Van Dyke.
Yes, thank you, through the chair. Just a question for administration. So my assumption is that this will be referred to administration to bring forward recommendations in the future. I'm wondering if it's possible that with those recommendations, if it would be, if we could include the other non-city-owned facilities that we have given loans to and what the terms, I understand those might have to come in closed, but if we could just have a broader sense of what we've done with other organizations as well when this comes forward to us.
City Manager Mitchell?
Thank you, through the chair. Just to put some parameters on it, Councillor Van Dyke, how far back do you want us to go? Because what we'd like to do, just because of the time frame, bring this back, doing our due diligence, making sure the report's fulsome, but that'll add some time to it. So if you could put some parameters on that, that would be helpful.
Yeah, sorry, I never thought of that. Maybe the last 10 years max. During our term, we would know in the last 3, I mean, we have some examples with the curling club and whatnot, but I'm not familiar with maybe some previous ones that had happened. So I know within audit and the documents we receive, we see other things with golf courses and whatnot, but we own some of that land, so it's slightly different, or we own the facilities as well or whatever, right? But just to get a bit of a sense of what we've done with other organizations in the community. Thank you.
Councillor Hyder, since you're second speaker, I'm going to go to Councillor Robbins and Sharps and then come back to you. Okay. Councillor Robbins.
Thank you very much, and through the chair. So today, hi, Mr. Edwards, and everybody else, President-elect, thank you very much for coming, and friends of the Stampede. I told you before, I grew up sort of in, we had lumberjack competitions, we didn't have Stampedes, but I've enjoyed them many times in the 25 years I've been here. So it wasn't my childhood, but it certainly is my adulthood and my children's childhood. So I'm very supportive of the Stampede. And this isn't really a question for you, but it's just maybe a comment. So as steward of public funds, we actually had an audit committee minutes that were in our package today. And so it's showing that we have an overall, we have a very well-managed market funds. And so they're making a 9.29% interest rate as of August 31st, 2024. So my concern always, and this is something that I'm sure we'll get from city administration in their recommendations, that they could look at this aspect of it. If you took $25 million from that, we lose the 9.29% on that $25 million, and that costs the taxpayers something very significant, I think, over time. And if the loan part, which I have no doubt the Stampede can pay back. I have great confidence in your history of doing so and managing your affairs really well. But at 0%, we're still losing our 9.29. So I need to know, and it's not a question for you to answer, from our city staff of what is the cost beyond just the number you're asking for, because there is a bigger loss to the city there that we have to consider, I think, when we're looking at all this. But I do have a question about your report as well. It just happened to be in the audit committee today. Good luck, bad luck, I don't know, but something I thought I'd point out. But I did have a couple of questions, or at least one, if that's all right, Madam Mayor, if I could.
Yes.
And it was just about, oh no, my comments won't open. I'll have to scroll through, sorry.
Do you want me to come back to you?
No, it's just right here, sorry. Madam Chair, you can decide if you want to come back to me, but I'm very close to having it here. Oh, now I went too fast. Some of the questions have been asked already, so I don't need to re-ask them here. Might have been, maybe you should go to Councillor Hyder and I'll check back in. It'll just take me a second, sorry.
It's actually Councillor Sharps's turn. Councillor Sharps?
Thank you. Through the chair. I just had actually a quick question through the chair for whoever, Mayor Clark is. So this particular, because I'm assuming administration's taking this back so we can debate it at a later date. But my question is, going back to the nonprofit capital grant program, does this specific ask go through that program before it comes back to us? How does that work?
City Manager Mitchell?
Thank you. Through the chair, because the sequencing was off and the ask came before the capital grant program was in place, we're working on the process and we're still working on those particulars, Councillor Sharps.
Thank you.
Councillor Robbins?
All right, thank you. I found my spot again. My question was about the findings of the financial analysis so what slide specifically. So there's two comments there. One, which we knew and we've heard about, which is great. There's a solid financial base on which to build. But your second comment is about the operating margin. So it says operating margin of concern and must be addressed when moving forward from an investment perspective. The investment perspective certainly being important when I'm talking about the 9% we have in investments that are sort of secured as they are. Is there information that's maybe in the report, because we've been emailed the report now, which is really helpful. I'll look forward to reading it. Is there recommendations in the report about the operating margin and how that could be addressed? Because you've noted it as you said, you're not advocating one way or the other, and you've given us a great sort of, I'm not going to call it a red flag, let's call it an orange flag here, of saying this operating margin is of concern and must be addressed. Are there any recommendations or plan on how to address it? I know we've talked about getting more people in, increasing rent, increasing alcohol sales, I see all of that. Is that the way that it's going to be addressed? And this may not be a question for you, but it's in your report, so I just wondered.
Yes, as Councillor through the chair. I think we do have some comments in the report about what you need to consider. For me, it's all about governance, and you've raised your point about you're taking funds from here and you're moving them over here, so there's an opportunity cost of capital, and there always is. And what you're trying to trade off is the opportunity cost of that capital in a fund versus events and the contribution within the city. So I do appreciate that. But yes, in the report, we do talk about, here are some things that you could consider in order to make sure. We don't have a crystal ball. I can't guarantee anything in this world, right? But what we do know is that putting sound principles in place helps make sure that funds are spent properly and gives you the best shot at dealing with it. What I wanted to point out with the operating issues was back to a question earlier, looking at if you have a sinking condo fund, right, or you have something where you need to replace things, money has value to whoever holds it, right, and there's a return on investment and a return of investment. So what we need to do is make sure that what you're doing moving forward, that there's a responsibility associated around maintaining those entities going forward so that the operating margin improves based on improved capital. Because if you're taking that money and spending it on something else over here and not on generating new revenue, then everything we've done in our model falls apart. And so our recommendation is about the governance of that, making sure that the money is being spent for what it's designed for so that you can increase the revenue on a daily basis to the $2,100, I think it is, we were working at, to make sure that that's going in the right place and as it was designed to go. And so yes, in very long answer to your question, but yes, it is in the report. You should find some elements about that around governance and expenditures.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. I look forward to reading it.
Counselor Hyder?
Thank you, and quickly through the chair, probably to Bob Burden. Just throughout this and all the money that we're talking about, was there ever, is there estimated costs in there for overtures to the project? Any expenses that will be above? Because we all know how things are. It's gonna cost us 5, but we end up spending 7.8 or whatever. Was that ever included any of the financials or?
Good question, Councillor, through the chair. Yes, indirectly, no, not directly. I didn't put it in, I always call it the pie factor, right? You take your expenses and multiply them by 3.14. Oh, okay. Sorry, but in terms of the model, the model we built allows, if you have the governance in place, it allows you to look at, oh, we found something here, we can, now what does that mean in terms of the outcomes? So
Okay.
we've tried to give you a robust model
Okay.
to deal with that. In terms of the actual expenditures,
Kenzie might have something there. Hi, Kenzie.
Councillor Hyder, through the chair. Yes, we did include contingency, so there's a estimating design contingency of 10% and a construction contingency of 8% in the budget.
Great.
So that's followed through in both numbers. And I will point out that these two estimates were projected for third quarter next year, so this time next year. So we have increased the number you saw on October 23 to be this time next year, presuming that would be when we could get started.
Right. Thanks, Kenzie. Thanks, Bob.
Counselor McGrogan?
Thank you. I really have more of a comment than a question. I'm fairly well immersed in this. I want to thank you all for the presentation and the representation tonight. I really like the governing board example. It's just an idea that I think is really adds some confidence to this. This was, in my mind, and the report I haven't had an opportunity to read yet, is extremely valuable. And I know it's been frustrating for the board to keep coming back. But we actually have a picture, I think, now of what it looks like, and I think with admin's help, we'll be able to make an appropriate decision with this information. So I know it's been frustrating for some of you, and I understand that, but I'm thankful for this report and look forward to reading it so we can make the best decision on behalf of the citizens of Medicine Hat. Thank you.
Counselor Dumanowski?
Thank you, Worship. I think it's appropriate that I follow up just a couple of comments as well after Councillor Grogan, who has been a steadfast representative for your organization to Council. I really mean that. To Mr. Edwards and others, you've weathered many months, many years of patience around the soon-to-be decision point around this. As Councillor McGrogan said, each time you presented, we left you with questions. And this isn't just this term, it's the previous term as well. And you were able to come back, and this report and the presentation, the pro forma plans and extrapolations here paint in my opinion, reasonable and probable picture. It's a question really about partnership. And again, I'm going to hold my decision for another day. And I guess my only comment to that is that I'm hopeful that this council will have the fortitude to make a decision. We have a lot of competing factors, certainly, but I would hate to see this be forwarded or left to another council where we have less than a year in our mandate. And I think a decision one way or the other needs to be made. The alternative, of course, of doing nothing has grave consequences. When I think about many partnerships that we enjoy with others in our community, this one is probably one of the longest, most well-established ones. And the prospects of what it can do are pretty significant. So I thank you for all of you coming this evening and for your patience mostly in this whole process, and hopefully we'll have an answer for you soon.
Councillor Knodel?
Thank you, Mayor Clark, and through the chair. So a similar echo to the last two speakers, Councillor McGrogan and Councillor Dumanowski. I feel a lot more clarity moving into a decision now than I did in the past. I feel like I've got a better picture mentally to make a decision upon. So I appreciate that, and I really sincerely do appreciate the work that's been done on this project and how long it's taken. I also have had some time to process the importance of the work or the connection that the community makes to the events that happen at the Stampede. Not that I couldn't see it before, but I've really, really thought about it and observed how important it is to our community. And people love going to the Stampede, and it's an important part of our community. So thank you for the work that you've done, and I look forward to coming together to make a decision.
And that is all the speakers. Thank you very much for patiently answering all of our questions as per usual. And it'll be up to administration now to come back with a briefing note for us to consider. And thank you for whoever sent us the report.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Clark. I would just in conclusion here, the city and the Stampede over the years has had great partnerships, and I would remind you of the one of the field house that they started 25 years ago, when the city came to us and said, you know, we need to build a soccer dome and we have no place to play soccer indoors. Could we build something on your ground? And it was a win-win for both of us, because we moved our spring rodeo from down in the arena for our first year up into that facility after it was built. So it was, to this day, we've had some great partnerships with the city. It's still going strong. We play everything in there plus rodeo. So I thank you for listening to us and giving us the time today, this evening, and we'll look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 10 is the public hearing for bylaw 4830, rezoning of 29 2nd Street Southwest. So I would ask the administration presenting to come down. And a reminder, I guess, that this is an application for rezoning as opposed to a development permit. So I will have Mr. Sissons confirm this when he gets down, but if a development wants to go on this property, then the public will be notified and given another opportunity to come and speak, or to speak to planning or object to the development. So I will call the public hearing on bylaw 4830 to order on at 8:16 p.m. And we will have an introduction from Robert Sissons and a presentation.
Thank you, Your Worship. Hello. Thank you, Your Worship. As mentioned, I'm Robert Sissons. I'm the Manager of Planning, and I'll be going through the presentation for bylaw 4830 today to rezone 29 2nd Street Southwest from low-density residential district to medium-density residential district. In this presentation, we will review the site context, land use bylaw amendment details, land use policy documents, including the municipal development plan, Herald neighborhood plan, and the land use bylaw. Then I'll show some photos of the site, and lastly, we will provide the recommendation to council. So the site is located within the Herald neighborhood on the southwest hill, and it's identified with the red line on the map. The surrounding properties are primarily zoned as low-density residential, containing a mix of single detached houses, as well as some medium-density residential lands containing things like low-rise apartments and some multiple unit residential developments. Further to the east in the orange, you can see a more predominant medium-density residential area. as you cross over Division Avenue. Directly south of the site are vacant escarpment land zoned as direct control district, and there's also 2 sites zoned as low-density residential district to the southeast. So an application was made by Scotty Signature Homes to rezone the subject lands. The land use bylaw amendment is for the rezoning from low-density residential district to medium-density residential district. The intent of the zoning is to accommodate future medium-density residential uses on the site. The subject lands previously had a single detached house, and a demolition permit was issued in February of 2022. And the house was obviously demolished. The site is currently vacant. Technical coordinating committee circulation was conducted for review and comments on the proposed rezoning, and no major technical concerns were raised at this point that would suggest rezoning the subject lands to RMD is unsuitable. So a portable sign was placed on site September 6th to inform the public and allow for the submission of comments on the proposal, which are considered in the decision through the statutory public hearing. So the sign is in place and has been in place for 2 months, which is a little bit of a change in process, where we've now started to place the sign from before MPC till after the statutory public hearing tonight. PDS, Planning and Development Services, did receive some questions regarding the rezoning, which were answered. There was one comment that was provided through our internal portal. We asked if they wanted that comment forwarded on to the statutory hearing, and they said no.
Would you mind just reviewing the questions that you've answered, like what the answer to those questions was?
I don't have them. They're just minor technical questions, but I don't have them.
So not
on
the
me.
stuff that's in our package?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. So there's with rezonings, planning. When we receive comments in now with rezonings, we will just forward them on to the city clerk if requested to be included within the public hearing package. But if it's just a small technical question, like what is the address of the zoning, can you provide me a list of the land use districts or something like that, we would just respond directly to the inquiry.
Thank you.
So I'll just note that this application does predate the updated council strategic priorities that were released recently. So under the previous direction, however, rezoning the site to a medium-density residential district is supported by council's strategic plan, priority number 1.9, and will facilitate an incremental increase of development from a low-density type built form to a medium-density built form. So the next few slides, we'll discuss policy documents, starting with the municipal development plan. The subject lands are located within the city center sector, which the MDP identifies as this area having existing servicing capacity to accommodate future intensification. Rezoning the subject lands to medium density residential aligns with the MDP policies within the how we grow and where we grow sections of the plan. So things such as supporting diverse residential forms, constructed within established neighborhoods, encouraging small-scale redevelopment of vacant infill sites, and allowing for a range of missing middle housing types. So I'll just note that the full explanation of those policies are contained within the report to council. So the subject lands are located within the statutory Herald Neighborhood Plan, which is an area redevelopment plan under the Municipal Government Act. The proposed rezoning is generally consistent with that broad vision of the plan. The proposed rezoning is also consistent with the 2 applicable overarching objectives as stated in this slide. The proposed rezoning maintains the residential use of the site, and the proposed rezoning facilitates what can be viewed as an incremental increase for the site, as it will be redeveloped as a small-scale, low-rise, multiple-unit residential development built form. So this is consistent with the context of the surrounding area and should not alter the character of the neighborhood substantially. So this next bit is a little bit more technical, but the slide on the left is a comparison. So this is a comparison of the neighborhood districts map. The left one portrays the generalized land use concept from the Herald Neighborhood Plan. And the image on the right is the zoning districts within the land use bylaw. So in the Herald Neighborhood Plan, it does show the general area in yellow as low-density residential. And the site is indicated by the little red marker in the middle of the plan. In section 2.3 of that plan, it does say that neighborhood districts within that Herald Neighborhood Plan describes that the land use concepts in the plan do not represent individual zoning districts contained within the land use bylaw. Rather, they are a long-term guide for establishing a land use and built form pattern for an area. So although in the plan it talks about low-density districts and medium-density districts, it's not a direct equivalent to what's in the land use bylaw. So that's an important distinction. Policy 3A does state, though, within that plan that the low-density residential district shall remain residential and low-density in character. The rezoning or redevelopment of sites to accommodate a higher intensity of residential land use. So an example they give is townhouses or apartments, or non-residential land uses such as commercial shall not be allowed. So administration's position on this is that while rezoning to medium-density residential district could in certain circumstances be viewed as accommodating higher intensity land use, due to the small scale of the parcel of land that we're actually talking about here, and the built form that would be possible to build on that site, we don't view that as significantly increasing the density of that parcel. If the parcel was substantially larger, such as some of the sites further to the east across division, so maybe let's say a 200-foot wide or a 300-foot wide site, then that could be viewed as a much more intense development, and that would be a different story and probably a different recommendation from administration. So it really comes down to we don't have a good middle ground between our current options of residential zoning districts. So you either have the low density or the medium density, and the medium density takes everything up from 3 units and above to large apartment blocks. So we feel that this can be mitigated by the fact that the lot is actually quite small and wouldn't support a large development form.
So if I may, you're saying that it won't support a larger development, but in order for this land use to make sense, it has to be at least how many? Like, could someone just build a up-down basement suite and above ground? Because that seems like it would fit into single family.
Correct. So through the chair, right now with the low density district zoning, they can build up to 2 dwellings. So it could be an up-down duplex, detached house with a basement suite, a side-by-side dwelling. But what the developer is looking to do is go beyond 2 units. So that's what's triggering the rezoning.
I guess my question is, what do you see as feasible? Because you're saying it's, like, given the nature of the lot, it's not going to be a large increase in dwellings. What is possible on that site?
Yeah, so I will, through the chair, I do have that in about 4 or 5 slides. I kind of walk through the uses and how many units that would be reflected.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. So here are some examples of the built form on some of these sites that were what I would say is spot zone to medium density residential throughout that area. So they include things like the little mini apartment in the top left corner, which is directly across the street, to multiple unit residential developments throughout the area. And there's just a variety of built forms. I would say the closest comparison to what would be accommodated on the site would be those upper 2 images. So the 2 smaller buildings on the upper left and upper right. And administration does recognize that preserving this established land use pattern is an important outcome of the plan. And as I mentioned earlier, if the site was larger or they were accumulating multiple sites and consolidating that, we would probably not have a favorable recommendation. So again, this image just shows the context of the area we just discussed. The locations noted with blue arrows identify other locations that already have some of these smaller scale multiple unit developments, and in proximity to the red marker, which is the subject site. And so next I'll just move along into the land use bylaw. So as I mentioned earlier, the current zoning of low density residential only allows for a maximum of two dwelling units on a site. So that rezoning to medium density would allow that residential development for greater than those 2 units. So some of the things we would look at in a review would be things like site dimensions, minimum site area, maximum building height, and density regulations of the RMD district. So here you can see, just looking at the density regulation alone, it does limit some of those building types to a certain amount of units. So on screen are permitted and discretionary uses within the medium density district with highlighted text on the number of units that each site could achieve, just based on that one regulation though. So, and I will just flag a little note that the one under discretionary use that says attached housing 2 or 3 dwellings, that should say actually a maximum of 4 units, because each side of a semi-detached could have a suite if it was subdivided. So that's just a clarification. The multiple unit residential development right here could be developed with a maximum of 5 units, while an apartment could be developed with up to a maximum of 10 units. But it's important to note that there's other restrictions on the site. So for example, as you get into an apartment, the setbacks become much greater. You're restricted on things like minimum site area and those types of things. So if you were to go into a 10-unit apartment, it may not even be feasible from the size of the site and just considering the topography and that type of thing. So while under that one regulation, yes, you can go 10 units. Other things like this minimum site area would also regulate, and they would have to seek a variance on some of those. Also at the time of development permit applications, we do look at the design, the character and appearance of the building. We'll assess the site context, building massing, architecture, all those types of things, just to see if it's compatible for the type of site.
Councillor McGrogan?
Thanks to the chair. Could you tell me if the bylaw encompasses parking, or is that from the development process, the development permit process, or is part of this rezoning, is the parking considered for multifamily units? Is there a rule in the bylaw in relation to how many parking spots per unit, I guess is what I'm asking.
So through the chair, we would assess the parking at the development permit stage. Generally speaking, so this site has access to 2nd Street. It also has access to a lane in the very back of the site. And you'll see in the subsequent pictures, there's quite a bit of a grade difference from front to back, but that doesn't mean that they couldn't do some stuff on the back side for parking. Another interesting aspect about this site is that this block doesn't have very many front access points for other development along that street. So there's a lot of uninterrupted street parking in comparison to, let's say, a modern suburban neighborhood where there's essentially very little on-street parking that's legal. You also have some large lots in the 100-foot or even greater that provide large stretches of uninterrupted on-street parking. But that would all be assessed depending on what is actually proposed through the development permit. So this is the front of the site. As mentioned, there's quite a bit of a grade difference from the street level to the back lane, which is more or less where the power line is. The driveway on the lot to the right is actually one of the very few, at least on the eastern portion of the block, that actually has a driveway access. This is another site looking north towards 2nd Street, so from the rear lane area, so you can see again, the grade difference, but there is a possibility through some design elements that you could incorporate a parking in the rear of the site as well. Generally on these sites, you're looking at, for example, on the back of a site like this, off a lane, you could probably achieve 5 parking stalls. Whereas in the front, you might have that a bit more restricted to something, let's say, like 4.
Just on the parking piece, one of the concerns was in the wintertime, there's only parking on one side of the street. And the perception from the neighbors is that parking can get quite congested. Is that something that you would consider during a development permit?
Yes, so through the chair, we would look at what the adjacent development is in the area. From the images I've seen, it hasn't appeared like there's a shortage of on-street parking, like in some areas, like for example, near the hospital, we see high congestion of parking there. Simply because there is a lot of legal parking on the street because there's no driveways. So that's substantial. That's a big difference in compared to a lot of the streets we have in the community. It's something we would look at for sure. It depends on what the developer proposes. Ideally, they would have on-site parking included as part of their concept. That would accommodate what their needs are.
Thank you.
So it is recommended through the Municipal Planning Commission that City Council approve bylaw number 4830 to rezone 29 2nd Street Southwest from low-density residential district to medium-density residential district.
Thank you very much. Now, the city clerk will read the notification report, and then I'm going to ask if you have any questions to just come down to the podium, state your name, your first and last name, spell your last name, and if you're speaking for or against. But in the interim, if you wouldn't mind reading the report, and we received one letter that you are going to read as well.
Yep. Thank you, Your Worship. Bylaw 4830 to amend the land use bylaw to rezone 29 2nd Street Southwest to medium-density residential district. Bylaw 4830 received first reading on October 7th, 2024. Public notice of the subject bylaw was published in the Medicine Hat News on Saturday, October 19th and Saturday, October 26th, 2024. A notification letter related to the proposed bylaw 4830 was mailed to 46 adjacent abutting properties on October 9th, 2024. 3 written submissions were received from Artis Tingley, Gwendy Baldy, and Lauren Smith. The first 2 mentioned are in your package, and the one from Lauren I will quickly read. Hello, I am a resident and owner of 53rd 2nd Street Southwest, and I'm writing in regards to the proposed rezoning of 29 2nd Street Southwest. I have several concerns with the potential rezoning. I have found that dependent on who the property manager is, frequently medium-density housing can harbor issues, and I'm very concerned if such a company such as Avenue Living or like that may be coming in, as these businesses can frequently take advantage of their tenants. I am also coming in as these businesses frequently, I also am concerned about what the plan is for parking for these residents. Many residents on this street, especially the side which they do not have garages or driveways, and adding several or more vehicles will create parking issues, also considering the high likelihood of guests also taking up parking and making it more difficult for existing residents to park close to their homes. There's also concern of noise increase, as more residents creates a higher chance of individuals who will not be conscious of their surroundings and may create disruption in a currently very quiet neighborhood. I would be opposed to rezoning this plot. Thank you.
Thank you very much. At this time, if there's anyone who wants to speak for or against the bylaw, please come down to the podium, state and spell your name and whether you're speaking for or against the bylaw. for a second time. If there's anyone who wishes to speak for or against this bylaw, please come down to the podium, state and spell your name, and whether or not you are for or against the bylaw. And for a third and final time, if you would like to speak for or against this bylaw, please come down to the podium, state and spell your name. Actually, is there a sheet of paper up there with a pen that you can write your name on? Okay,
No pen.
okay. That would be helpful. So in which case, please state your name, but also write it down on the paper, fill out the paper.
I'm not too sure on how this works, but.
So over, oh,
My name
yes,
is Duncan Voldy.
okay.
I'm against this proposal for the reasons I'll say in a second there. I'm saying, is that good enough? I'm not sure how you do this. Huh? Oh, right there. Okay, sorry.
We just started with this a couple weeks ago, so
Okay.
thank you.
We're on. Yeah. As I state there, the proposal he had, there's a lot of gaps in there, basically a lot of rubbish too. That lot is like your stairs there is steep. Come wintertime, it blows in with snow. The whole back alley blows in with snow, so there's no parking in the back. If you go in the back alley, you'll see nobody parks in the back there because there's nowhere to park. It's on a hill. So therefore, you've got parking on the street. Come wintertime, the apartments across the road there, they park up and down the street. There's very little parking left. Even in their back alleys, they snow in and get slippery. So basically then everybody's on the road, you know, and it's terrible. How do you say it's not a good idea. As you say, if it's going to be say a fourplex going in there, okay, on an average, you say each plex will have 2 vehicles. So you've got 8 vehicles. Come Christmas time, you could triple that, you know, with people visiting. And we already at the moment have damn near little to none parking-wise. Plus, I suppose, the usual, which is the valuation of the properties. Nobody, I would imagine nobody here really wants a 4-plex or 6-plex right next to them. I could be wrong, but but basically the parking is a bad one. And as you say, it's on a really steep hill. So if you park in the back there, you're going to be on the street pretty quick. Have I
Thank
missed
you.
anything?
I will ask Mr. Sissons if you have a response to that.
Yeah, so through the chair, it is recognized that the lane in the back is not in the greatest of shape at this point. So that could be one aspect of that if there is parking proposed in the rear, that through a development agreement, we could require the developer to improve that laneway to the point where it does become feasible to park back there. In terms of, is there space there right now to park? No, obviously not, but that's something that could be engineered, that there is surface parking back there if needed.
Yeah. As you say, it snows in. You can't get down the back alley. Anyway, I better move over and let the next one have a go.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, Councillor Knodel has a question maybe for you, Mr. Boldy.
It's likely for Manager
go for it.
Sissons, but through the chair to Manager Sissons. So in Medicine Hat, street parking is, I don't want to use jargon, but free game, if I'm not mistaken. There's no dedicated, if you're on the street, it's not like a property would have dedicated space in front of their property. So I'm just thinking of Mr. Baldy coming home with groceries and wanting to be able to park in front of his property and then hauling those groceries from down the street. I think if it's visiting, it's not a big deal if you have to walk down the street. But if I'm thinking of him coming to his house at the end of the day and not having a place to park. So I think you understand my question. If you can just allude to that, thank you.
Yeah, so through the chair, you are correct, Councillor Knoll, that on-street parking is first come, first serve, unless the only exceptions to that sometimes are if there's an accessibility requirement. They will sometimes post some special signage. The other examples where if it does become highly high usage, so the main one I would give as an example is near the hospital, where you have a large operations that is people coming and going that don't necessarily live there, so then you would have parking passes. But for this area, I don't imagine that you would have that level of on-street parking for that.
And if you would, could you please also, I described it at the beginning, but just for clarity and make sure I didn't make a mistake. Once a development permit application is made, it will identify the actual plan, and the neighborhood will have an opportunity to provide objections or comments at that time when they can see the actual plan.
So through the chair, yes, that is correct. When there's a development permit application made, we would review all the different regulations in the bylaw. There'll be another sign that gets posted on site similar to the rezoning one, but it will have things such as how many units are there. It'll have a concept of the development proposal, and they can either come into City Hall and view the plans in their entirety, or they can actually, you can actually click through the website. There's a QR code, you can just scan it, it'll take you right to where the development plans are as well.
And if they are still unsatisfied at that point, what is the next step?
So depending on the type of development, and if there's variances or not, so if it's a discretionary use or there's variances, then they could appeal it to the Subdivision and Development Appeal Board. If it's a permitted use and there's no variances, then there'd be very limited options for any appeals.
The permitted uses is maximum of 4 units. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, sure.
Is that, because that's what it said on the slide, and I think.
Yeah, with that particular one, the permitted use is for 4 units. So that is contemplating a larger row house design, which I don't believe at 15.2 meters, they would have enough width on that site to do 4 units across. So they would likely fall under either the multiple unit residential development for a different configuration, or so that's why I kind of mentioned, even though some of these are listed and I can provide what the unit count would be on them, just because of the site layout and the small scale of the site, they might not even be feasible.
And also, I heard you say that we needed a in-between zoning that would be for smaller, that will come forward to council with the land use bylaw amendment?
So through the chair, yeah, we do have a larger amended land use bylaw project that we're working on, and that is something that is contemplated, because we often find when people see the term medium density zoning, that it often implies like it's a larger apartment or something like that. Whereas in this particular case, what you're really going to see at the end of the day is a small scale development that has a few more units than a typical home with maybe a suite would be.
Thank you.
Yep.
Now to our next speaker.
Hi, everyone. My name is Corey Fensky, and I am against the proposal for very much the same reasons that Mr. Baldy presented as well. The large one being parking, and I know that's been discussed a bit. With regards to the back laneway, that I would say throughout the summer, throughout the spring, summer, fall months, that may be an option for parking. But winter maintenance, there's been no winter maintenance on that back laneway for many years. We used to have garbage pickup in the back. That's been removed to the front because of access to that area. It's not only the condition of the current laneway right now, but it's access throughout the winter months. It's not maintained at all. Even if it is maintained periodically, it's a very steep grade coming out onto that street. So there's definitely potential for incidents. If it's icy at all, you won't stop until you're onto Division. So that's definitely a concern. Also getting off of Division into the back laneway, it's the same situation. If you get partway up and you lose traction, you're backing out onto First Street, and that's also, I would say, a large safety concern. And that's no matter which way you go out or in that area. So, yeah, the parking is definitely the big concern on my part. Because first of all, if we do take away some of that back laneway parking, then it's congesting the Second Street itself. And right now, all the residents there currently, for the most part, respect that we all need our parking spots. And so it all works right now, but if we're congesting one lot with multiple units, that's just gonna make the issue worse, so.
Thank you. Managing Director Bohan, are you familiar with this situation about the maintenance?
Yes, we don't currently provide services to back lanes in the city, so it's not even listed as a priority route.
But is it in disrepair?
The laneway itself isn't in great shape. There used to be curbing along along one side of the alleyway, which I think at one point was used to direct water. A lot of that's been removed over the years by probably snow maintenance at one point. Along my property, it's gone, and that has actually allowed to other issues of water being directed into my property, which I've kind of dealt with in my own way. Yeah, so the roadway itself isn't in great shape, and a big part of that is just the topography of it. It's the steep grade coming in and out off of Division. That is a big concern, whereas other laneways aren't necessarily maintained, but this is a pretty unique area as far as how it's designed, and it's all on a hillside, so that makes things more challenging.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did anyone have any questions for Mr. Fenske? Oh, sorry, just for Mr. Fenske, you'll have to come down and put your name on the list.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
I'm sure we could take this question first, I suppose.
My name is Gwenda Baldy, and I live next door to the 29. And my problem is the sewer out front. Everybody out there has problems. It's usually on city land that it takes place, the backup, but we're always the ones who have to pay for it, and it happens a lot. The sewer's never been replaced, it's 100 years old.
And so are you talking about like when like trees, the roots get into the,
Yeah,
okay.
all of the above, yeah. Yeah, it's terrible. Everybody has the same problem, and there's only one person in town that has the equipment to clean it out.
That is another issue that perhaps Managing Director Bohan can look into and get back to Ms. Baldy.
Great, yeah.
And I think we have a letter from you, so we'll have your
Yes,
contact
yeah.
information, yeah.
Yeah. I was going to put that in, but my husband told me it wasn't important.
All right, go ahead.
Hi, my name's TJ Cranston. I am here to speak in support of the rezoning permit application. So I do have slides as well to help hopefully show everyone kind of what we're looking to achieve here on this site. We do know it is a challenging site, and there are some technical issues that we will have to, work through to make sure that we keep everyone happy in the neighborhood. So myself, I'm the owner and operator of Scotty Signature Homes. I was born and raised in Medicine Hat. Love this community, chose to come home after schooling in business and construction management through University of Lethbridge. I was working in the construction industry during that time as well. I would just like to start by thanking the Honorable Mayor Clark, City Councilors, and all the members of the community for your time today and your consideration towards our rezoning proposal at 29 2nd Street Southwest. Our company, Scotty Signature Homes, is a locally owned family business. Our management team of 3 members has a combined 55 years of construction experience in Medicine Hat and the surrounding area. Okay, so our team is currently in the final stages of completing 2 technically challenging green space developments on Ranchlands Boulevard. We've completed 20 homes over the last 5 years. We take great pride in hiring local tradesmen and supplying materials from reputable, locally owned, unoperated businesses for nearly all aspects of our construction. We have also maintained great relationships with the neighboring residents to these large-scale projects by keeping a clean site and addressing any minor concerns that have come up quickly and to their satisfaction. So here are a few pictures of our construction on Ranchlands Boulevard that feature more traditional designs, very similar to the exterior style we are proposing for the development on 2nd Street. For our construction in Ranchlands, we prioritize using color and design combinations that complement the neighborhood itself and the surrounding natural area. We want to ensure everyone the same care will be applied to the project on 2nd Street. The proposed project as seen here is for the pre-cleared infill lot that we purchased on 29 2nd Street. The proposed project is a 3-story multifamily residential structure. It will look like a 2-story house with a front basement walkout as seen in this rendering we have created from preliminary construction designs. The structure will contain 4 to 6 dwelling units. The unit count will be based on how the property can be most appropriately developed for adequate parking, total tenant capacity, while ensuring we meet all of the construction codes, permit requirements, and service requirements for the property. Our priority is to build the most suitable option possible for the space. If we determine 4 units are most appropriate based on those guidelines, we will also be constructing 1 unit that will be designed for special needs of low mobility residents in the community. If the structure contains 6 units, 2 of these units will be designed for low mobility residents and constructed accordingly to accommodate the same. These units will meet the guidelines set out in Alberta's barrier-free design guide for low mobility residential construction. The general appearance of the structure will not change based on 4 or 6 units, and it will appear like a single-family home with a basement walkout like is seen above. Our current progress, we've been able to gain the support of planning and development services. For the rezoning application by working together to ensure the development aligns with the goals of the Herald Neighborhood Plan and the Housing Redevelopment Incentive. I'd like to quickly thank and acknowledge the team at Planning and Development Services for their guidance and support in the planning of this and other successful projects we have done over the years. We are currently working closely with Planning and Development Services through the preliminary technical aspects of the project in anticipation of the site being rezoned. This project was awarded a grant for construction through the Infill and Redevelopment Incentive Program based on the merits of how it met the goals of the city's current densification initiative as outlined by the incentive program. The goals are as follows: to trigger new development, to increase diversity in the housing market, to level the playing field for infill development, to boost value per hectare of urban areas, to recoup the incentive with new taxes, and to build on existing infrastructure. This project spans the board and hits on all of the goals, all of the city's goals outlined by the program. Okay. Sorry. This project also aligns with the overall goals of the neighborhood plan. Firstly, it is not in conflict with the need for the plan. The following is directly from the plan prescribing the need for it. In recent years, the Herald Neighborhood Plan has faced development pressures in the form of commercial businesses expanding from downtown and adaptive reuse of homes as various types of offices. Council has recognized that it is important to ensure that future redevelopment does not negatively impact the established neighborhood character of Herald. This project is based on improving the residential options for the neighborhood in a controlled way versus expanding commercial properties into the residential space. Another primary goal of the plan is maintaining the character of the neighborhood. We are going to design and construct in a way that mirrors the character of traditional homes in the area, as could be seen by the rendering that we've created. The structure will be built into the side of the slope with appropriate setbacks to blend it into the existing neighborhood. There are also medium density sites in the immediate area of the property, including one located directly across the street. Keeping all of this in mind, the Herald Neighborhood Plan has flexibility for circumstances that the plan cannot anticipate. The plan states rezoning may be required to keep the plan in alignment with other city initiatives in changing time. This plan by design allows City Council to approve this rezoning application at your discretion. This is an opportunity for the honorable members of the City Council to rezone this site based on the overall benefit of the project for the whole community of Medicine Hat, as well based on its merit in aligning with the overall goals of the city neighborhood plans and city incentive programs. This is an opportunity to create an amazing housing option for young professionals entering the community and members of the public with limited mobility alike. Thank you everyone for your time and consideration today, and I would just like to add that if I did have my full site plan on here, we've got room for 7 to 9 parking spaces on there. So there is ample space at the parking at the back for 5 vehicles. There's enough room for 3 vehicles with 2 handicap spaces at the front. And we know that we can make this work for everyone. So thank you for your time again.
Thank you. You have a question, Councillor Knodel?
Thank you, Mayor Clark, through the chair. So we heard a concern, and this is us thinking beyond the scope of what we're making a decision on today, but there was a concern about property management. I'm just wondering what your process is typically. So you've got your ranch lands development. When you build your property, are they sold immediately, and or are they turned into, like, would there be condo fees in this building? Can you kind of walk us through the process of transfer of ownership, or does it become a rental?
Okay. So our company started off building in ranch lands, primarily focused on taking green space and actually developing it, servicing it, and then selling it off as individually titled properties, so fee simple properties. And then we did hit a point, we had some designs that incorporated, they were duplexes with basement suites. They were nice, but unfortunately with interest rates taking off during COVID and things getting so crazy in the housing market, our target market kind of just fell off the radar, and we ended up sitting on some really great product for over a year completed. So we decided, you know what, we can't do this forever. We didn't want to give it away because we knew it was a great product. So we decided to actually start an in-house rental company, okay? So we'll personally be managing the rental side of things, and trust me, we're not looking for any headaches with renters or noise complaints or those types of things. You know, essentially, we've done a great job of bringing some very nice renters into the neighborhood and ranch lands. We haven't had any complaints about our people there, and that's just through our vetting process, making sure that we're not hastily just getting people into these units, that we're finding the right people, long-term renters, you know, professionals, things like that, that the spaces are designed for. These aren't gonna be, you know, let's fit as many units as we can in one spot and just get multiple rents over and over and over from as many units as possible. These are gonna be more for people who aren't ready to buy a home, are moving into the community. You know, we're renting to some people from Calgary that are just looking at what they're gonna do for their house when they move here, but they want a nice place to rent. So those are kind of the people that we're trying to rent to, and again, it won't be different for this site because we are giving them a good space, quality finishes, and those types of things that do create another aspect in the rental market that isn't really available right now. So yeah.
Thank you. Can I add a comment? Is it appropriate to add a comment? Oh, no, I can't because we're in a public hearing.
Once the public hearing is closed. Councillor Dumanowski?
Yeah, Your Worship, I have a question, and then later on I'll have some comments. To the presenter, Mr. Cranston, thank you for your presentation. You did cite a response to the Herald Neighborhood Plan Area Redevelopment Plan, specifically the preservation of neighborhood character, preserving the neighborhood character, heritage resources to reinforce community identity and historical integrity. The image that you put forward does not complement, in my opinion, section 2.2. So either I missed something, or could you help me understand how what you're proposing would fit the preservation of character and heritage resources for that area?
Well, I think it's like for what we have for current construction materials in today's day and age, I think it comes down to, you know, using color combinations that really are going to complement the neighborhood, as far as having the same bricks that we had when the house was built 100 years ago, or the same types of posts that we can implement in front of a building. It's just not possible. So the best thing we can do is to mirror, you know, the design features as best we can and use the colors that complement the neighboring properties and traditional properties in the area.
If I could, just to the parking consideration, lots of conversation around that. You indicated there is room for 2 or 3 in the front, based on your proposal, 2 of which would be handicap accessible. So the majority would be at the back.
Yeah.
Some of the conversation that's been brought up by neighbors and even our staff around suitability or the integrity of that laneway, access, winter access, et cetera. What are your thoughts or your considerations around those comments?
I mean, it's a back alley. It's not necessarily a roadway. As far as like garbage trucks not driving down that alleyway anymore, I just built a neighborhood with 12-foot wide paved lanes in the back, and they want to pick them up at the front. So I'm not, you know, there's going to be lots of opportunity for people to drive in and out of there. That lane is enclosed all winter. You know, I see vehicles driving in and out of there and track marks throughout the year. I think any house, any street, any location in all of Medicine Hat, if you have the right storm, yeah, there might be some issues with people getting in and out of an alleyway to access their detached garage or their parking at the back of their house. I think it's a special situation where that's going to be of any type of concern whatsoever, and rare at best. So,
Councillor Sharps.
Thank you. Sorry, through the chair, I had a question around parking as well. And just bear with me, if you could just tell me, based on your plan, it's my understanding that there will be no requirement for off-site parking. Is that accurate?
based
It'll
on
all be
every
right.
unit having a parking space?
Yeah.
Yes, that is correct. That's a requirement of any secondary suite or apartment building, is that each unit has a parking spot for each residence, and we will be providing that, and probably a couple extras by the sounds of it. So, yeah.
Okay, so the concern is on if every suite has more than one vehicle, correct?
Yeah, just like any other residence, usually people have more vehicles than they have parking spots, but, you know, there are many houses in the neighborhood that have one parking spot, one driveway, or one spot in their driveway all up and down that street. I'm providing even slightly more than that in this
Thank you.
construction.
And no, thank you very much. And through the chair, Mayor Clark, I'm going to ask you to repeat some of the questions or some of the answers that you asked earlier, because my connection cut in and out a little bit. In the event that this is approved and there is further concerns by the neighborhood, am I correct in hearing that they would have to go through SDAB?
It's possible in certain situations, but the neighborhood will be notified by posting a sign when a development permit is applied for. And then members of the public who are impacted can go to planning and identify their concerns. If the concern is regarding a discretionary use, which in this case is anything above 4 units, or any other type of discretionary use, then people can apply for to the SDAB if the outcome of their lobby or their advocacy to the planning department is not satisfied. Robert, can you give me a nod? Was that? Go ahead.
Yeah, so through the chair, anything that is discretionary use or if a development permit receives a variance, those are matters that can be appealed. It has to be an appeal lodged by an affected resident. The developer can also lodge an appeal if they have concerns with how the approval was done by administration.
Councillor Sharps, is that the information you were looking for?
I believe so. So I just want to make sure that I've got this completely inaccurate. So if this is approved and the community has an issue, it sounds like it'll go to, they have the opportunity to talk to planning, but if planning doesn't align with their thoughts or their arguments, it will just go to SDAB. They can then file an appeal if they're in disagreement.
If the appeal is with respect to a discretionary use
Right.
or a variance to the development permit.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, I will call this public.
Can I just make one more
I apologize.
comment just
Oh,
for the
sorry, and I didn't see Mr. Payne there either. Go
Okay,
ahead.
so there are alternatives to me going through this process and rezoning this as medium density. I could simply subdivide the property and put 2 up and down homes with a suite on them with no parking requirements. I could build a 14-bedroom home and rent it out to individuals room by room. Like, there are alternatives that make a lot less sense than what I'm proposing today, where there's a lot less requirements and I guess hoops to jump through to get a similar or even more profitable result. So I'm trying to do this the right way and make sure that we do build a project that suits the neighborhood and considers all of the residents at the same time in the neighborhood. That's all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Payne?
Just gonna write my name down.
Thank you.
First off, I'd like to congratulate Mr. Cranston on an excellent presentation. I am speaking against the bylaw. I've knocked on a lot of doors in the last few years, as you probably have during your campaigns. I actually know where some of you live. I can imagine that some of you have probably seen different 4plexes, 6plexes, 8plexes. The visuals that we have, if we could pull up slide 251 of the package, the agenda packet. That's the one with the front view of the lot. Okay, so I think Mr. Sissons talked about character changes for the area. And then if we could just kind of hold that vision in our head and go to slide 8 of Mr. Cranston's presentation. One of the things that you'll note in there, and I think the local residents may be a little less blunt than I am, but when you go past some of these larger developments, 4plexes, 6plexes, 8plexes, you don't see all of the traffic in the visual that you'll see in Mr. Cranston's slide. I think it actually looks really good. Part of the problem is it changes the front view character because you're parking, I think he said, up to 5 vehicles up front. One of the things that you see when you go past these multi-family developments is you'll see lots of traffic, whether it's kids coming in, people moving in, people moving out. You've got 9 places for people to move in and out of. You see bikes everywhere. Sometimes you see broken fridges, those types of things. So I think these are some of the worries that they would have. And I think if you're gonna change the character of that area that much, I think it's something that you might wanna wait until you redo that land use bylaw. That's all I got, thank you.
Are there any questions for Mr. Payne? Okay, thank you very much. Seeing no further speakers, I will call the public hearing to a close at 9:13 PM.
And I will move that council gives second reading to bylaw 4830.
I'll second that.
Counselor Dubanowski.
Worship, just some comments. I appreciate the time and energy that has been put before us today by staff and the presenters. I find myself conflicted by a number of the pieces of information that were brought forward, not the least of which what I introduced as a question during the statutory hearing, the preservation of neighborhood character. I continue to be frustrated, very openly frustrated with the necessity to develop ARPs such as Herald, River Flats, and others, only to find repeatedly the integrity of those plans being compromised one development at a time. This is no exception to that same narrative that I have heard many times over the years. I appreciate that an empty lot in and of itself is maybe unsightly and undesirable, but as one of a former city councilor many years ago said, it's just not anything goes should take precedence over such an empty lot. And so for me, the ARP means something. When I was here, when we pass it, it means something. Not the least of which the preservation of character. That development, as beautiful as it is, it's extraordinarily modern and is completely incongruent with any historical preservation. The argument that there are other multifamily developments, I've heard that many times by planning as a defense for moving forward. Nothing against them, they're just doing their jobs, but that doesn't make it less wrong or more right. In my opinion, it just is an exacerbation of the problem, and that is that we have these ARPs and we're not adhering to them. I know they're discretionary. I know they're overarching plans, guidance plans, but if we put them in place, they ought to have weight. In fact, when we put them in place, the argument at the time was unless there were significant extenuating reasons to deviate, these overarching development plans, redevelopment plans would be adhered to, and we see them over and over and over again being ignored, quite frankly. So I'm troubled by that. As far as access to, I think we're misleading the public when we say that at the next stage they have the opportunity to challenge us. Once the permitted use is given, or there's any variance of any kind, yes, the public in theory has the right to challenge it, but their only mechanism is SDAB, and the realities of that are if they adhere to the principles of the development, the variances are reasonable for the space, et cetera, it's not going to be a fair argument for anyone to make. It will go ahead. We've seen recent situations where neighborhoods are challenged by redevelopments or new proposals that are incongruent with what is existing. This isn't a NIMBY, not in my backyard scenario. This is what is compatible, what is reasonable, what is the preservation of the character of a neighborhood. I've seen more and more of these coming forward. I don't want to get into a fight with neighbors and neighborhoods. I'll end where I started, that is we have an ARP that clearly identifies some objectives, and I haven't seen one yet. I will add one thing I just recalled. Over my time here on council, I've heard from the neighbors their pleas over at, not every winter, but many times where they were, the laneway was was inaccessible and was snowed in. That happens absolutely. One of the speakers said it happens everywhere. It does, but not to the extent of this lane. This one is well known. I've been here long enough, longer than many people who speak to that, and I've heard the complaints over the years. So that, and for many other reasons, but mostly the ARP component, I will not be supporting the bylaw.
Councillor Van Dyke?
Yes, thank you through the chair. So I differ from Councillor Dumanowski in many areas of this. So I have gone and seen the property when it first came for first reading. And I also have a friend, a really close friend who lives on that street, and I'm there a lot, like a lot over the last decade in all times of the day, all seasons of the year. And I understand the issues with parking and different times of the year, and I do rely on the systems and policies in place that during the zoning phase, we're talking about zoning. This is not at the development permit stage, and issues with the actual development process and parking will be brought forward in that phase and will be dealt with at that time. In regards to the character of the community, I know that we can make an assumption that since it's on 2nd Street, on the hill, that it's all 100-year-old character homes. But if you go down that street, you'll see that there are houses, the one next to it, on the picture, it was probably built in the 50s. My grandparents lived in a very similar house across from the hospital. It's that era. There are houses that are very modern style, built in the 60s and 70s. There are 100-year-old houses, and there are multi-unit properties across the street that are brick and concrete blocks of apartments. So I wouldn't say that there is a clearly defined character in that area that would be betrayed by a new build. I understand the limitations of materials. We can't duplicate necessarily construction that occurred 100 years ago, but a lot of the buildings on that street were built in the 60s and 70s. And so I'm not sure that there's a really set, defined character in that area, like I said, that's being betrayed by a build like this. So regarding multifamily, again, there's a lot of them in that area, all on 2nd Street, southwest and southeast, a lot of apartment buildings and the 4 units. If you're not looking for them, you might not realize it because they're not very large. They're the kind of older style we see in the older parts of the city where families would build them and sometimes live in one of the units themselves, so they don't stand out a lot, but they're there. So I understand the tremendous need for housing in this community. It's not just Medicine Hat, but I hear every day people who cannot find places to live. And while I do not want to raise conflict with neighbors, I'm trusting the development permit stage to deal with issues that may arise. And so I will support this.
Councillor McGrogan?
Thank you, and through the chair. Mr. Sissons, I did have a question or just some clarity about a comment that was made earlier in relation to the alley, if you want to call it that. I've driven up there. It's pretty primitive, but I guess it is that. What I'm wondering is, can you confirm if the alley does have to be upgraded? I don't know how we upgrade the hill portion, but I'm curious, is it something that the developer would have to pay for? And is there a certain standard, I guess, that I'm curious about? Because that back alley is extremely primitive in my view.
So through the chair, I mean, the alley, just based on some of the photos I've seen, is probably nowhere near close to what a modern laneway standard would be. So we would look to our municipal works department and our MSSM standards in terms of if it has to be upgraded, this is kind of what the newer standard looks like. It would have, it would take into account things such as drainage. That was obviously an issue and that type of thing. We can, through a development permit, require what's called a development agreement, which is where we can require a developer to upgrade certain things to ensure that the development is serviced, essentially. So in this case, if substantial parking is proposed at the rear of the property, then we can require them to upgrade that laneway from that point to, for example, Division Avenue, to make sure that it is roadworthy, if you will.
Thank you. That's all I really want to get clarity on, so I appreciate that. This is, I'm just gonna, I guess my comments are this, you know, we say we want development in areas, we want to develop, we have to trust the permit process, in my view, and the development process, like the builder pointed out. I mean, there are other ways to skin this cat as far as using that property. I do think he's trying to follow the rules. I watched the MPC, well, I was, of course, at the MPC meeting. I was chairing it when he gave another presentation, and it seems like a genuine, I guess, request to develop the area. So I'm going to trust that we do look at adequate parking, that it is available, and that it is on site, which I can't imagine how it could be, but that's not my area of expertise. So having said that, I probably am going to support it, but I do look forward to hearing from other council members before I make that decision.
Councillor Sharps.
Thank you, Mayor Clark, and through the chair. First, a big thank you to the developer and the plans that he came up with. I mean, I've seen this before, and I think it's gorgeous, and I think it's beautiful, and I think we do need the housing. I am struggling with our process, and that's unfortunate. So we've just recently watched a community area of our community have to pay for lawyers to do an SDAB hearing. They paid for technical help. They went and spent a lot of money just to have their voices heard. So now we're in a public hearing where we've had a few community members come forward, and I'm hearing their voices loud and clear. And I am so pro-development, but I think that it has to be done right. I hear a lot about we have a shortage of housing, but there's property all over that's still empty. And, you know, once we have a land inventory, we'll have a better idea of that. I think it's got to be in the right place at the right time, and it's got to suit that neighborhood. And I work down the street, or I used to work down the street for the last 20 years. I know where this land is. I think it's such a beautiful neighborhood. As much as nobody wants to be, you know, NIMBY about this, I have no problem saying that's just reality. Of course, you're going to look at it from your own backyard perspective. We all have to adapt to the growth and change, but I think these neighbors have every right to say, look, I don't think this is going to work for us. And I don't think they're being unreasonable. I think they're just needing to be heard. So if our processes were such that this was all done prior to coming to us, where we didn't go through the development permit and then said to the community, okay, now you can appeal it, I think I'd be more open to it, because then they would know what they were getting into. We would have a public hearing based on fact, not on speculation. That would make me very, very happy. So as it stands, I cannot support this. Not that I don't think it's exactly what we need. It's exactly what we need, but not in the right area. So just thought I'd share my thoughts.
Any other questions? Councillor Robbins?
Thank you, Mayor Clark, and through the chair, I don't have any questions. I will give my comments. I hear what we're hearing about parking. This is something that I experience in my own neighborhood from time to time, so I'm certainly aware of it, although I don't have off-street parking either in my own residence, so we all share the street, and we do it the best that we can, and as you said, your neighbors as respectfully as you can. I like the idea of off-street parking in this situation. I'm not sure the back alley is going to work, but it's not for me to say. The people who develop it, the people who are going to live there, are the ones who can decide if they want to risk that back alley in the wintertime. I likely wouldn't want to, but I'm not the one that's going to be living there. I get that what you've given us here is a rendering, and when I look, I've been just walking down, up and down the street in Google Maps here, just to get the sense of what the other homes look like, and it is a variety of different homes. There's some neighborhoods that have a very distinctive style, and it's reflected in their area structure plan. I know that I live in the flats, and there's as many different homes in the flats as you can imagine. Some of them are featured in the area structure plan, some of them are not. Anyway, I'm supportive of this development. Really, for a couple of reasons. One, I think that this type of housing available for rent is important to have in the community. I look at the other work that's been done and your statement about dealing with the neighbors while that work was being done. When I give some, of course, the development permit is going to lay out what all the rules are about that. That's not what I'm doing here. I'm saying to myself, I'm not going to get into operational things and what did I do, but went right into operational things. I do support this because one thing really is the accessible apartments, which are not readily available in the city of Medicine Hat. This is an area that's very close to the hospital, and it could really be a value to some people to live there, and I think they'd be great neighbors. I have lived next to infill construction, and it is a pain while it's happening, that's for sure. But I don't have any regrets of now I live peacefully in that area now that all the construction is over. So I am going to support this. I don't think that the rendering is maybe going to be the final product, and I think that our Planning and Development and Municipal Planning Commission can look at things and say, is this going to work for this neighborhood or not, and it still have lots of leeway to do that.
Councillor Canodal?
Thank you, Mayor Clark. So generally speaking, I wanted to share that I empathize greatly with the residents of this area and put myself in the shoes of what does day-to-day look like in a situation where you where your norms are affected by change. So at the same time, I share a lot of gratitude to the developer that came forward tonight and see a lot of unique traits that I hope that we can kind of nurture as our community grows and evolves. We need developers that respond to needs in our community, not those who are only in it for profit. Not to say that that's not a dig to the developers in our community. There's a lot of fantastic developers in our community that are doing it for the needs of the community and responding to needs. But I really see a special interest in responsiveness, inclusivity, innovation that I haven't had the opportunity of seeing come forward so far, as well as being present and being here to answer questions, so thank you. I want to see Medicine Hat, and I do really appreciate, as I interrupt myself, Dumanowski's comments, as well as those who are interested in seeing consistency in a neighborhood, but I also see, you go to other parts of the world where variety and differences aren't bad in a neighborhood, and seeing things be shaken up a little bit and learning to live differently isn't terrible. Now, Medicine Hat, that's not always representative of the mindset in this community, and I recognize that. For the purpose of this decision, I'm in support. I want to see growth and development happen, and I don't want to be impeding that growth. As the person sitting in this chair, I think it's important that we nurture that, even if it's a little different, even if there's a bit of friction, and I think it's important to support this tonight. Thank you.
Councillor Hyder?
Thank you, and through the chair, I'll just weigh in here. I appreciate everyone that's it takes some guts and some courage to come forth and express your concerns on where you live, where you love, and where you play. I live on the hill, so I, like Robert, I've lived here my whole life. I know the lane you speak of, and I know the lack of parking. I appreciate Mr. Cranston coming forward and doing a great display or presentation, and I appreciate that you came home to Medicine Hat to have a business, because a lot of young kids don't do that. And I look at you and I think you're young, so which is a good thing. Yeah, and I will be supporting the development of this. I've seen developments like the one you presented, and they're unique and they're eye-catching, and they are going to have families there and people there that want to have a life in Medicine Hat. So I will be supporting this, and I appreciate everyone's time tonight.
Thank you. I don't see any further speakers. I share the concerns. I certainly wouldn't, I'm fortunate enough to have on-site parking, and I certainly wouldn't want to have to lug my groceries if, I wasn't able to find parking. In this case, I also, share Robert, or Councillor Dumanowski's concerns and Councillor Sharp's concerns that, we develop these plans and then we change them. But I think that's part of life, and it comes back to council. And certainly, Councillor Sharp's point, we don't really know what we're approving when we do these rezonings. But the rendering was very helpful, and I know that that's not the end. Like, there's lots of steps before that comes to fruition, but I am certainly heartened by the fact that there will be off-site parking and that we have some control over that, rather than the scenarios that were outlined by Mr. Cranston of the other things that could be on that lot that would relinquish our control over parking and also maybe not fit in even as good with the neighborhood. Because our strategic plan says we're, supporting infill, that's appropriate. I trust that our planning department will make sure that this is not a dramatic departure from the neighborhood and will not cause the type of harms or concerns that have been outlined today. And also our strategic plan, and as we all know, have a housing crisis, and we've dedicated some funds to increase the number of dwelling units in Medicine Hat, and so for those reasons, I will be supporting the bylaw as well. We will vote.
I vote no.
Thank you, Councillor Councillor Sharps. So that passes, and you will record the no from Councillor Sharps. Yep. Do you want to do third reading or? Okay.
Just reflecting. I move the council gives third and final reading to bylaw 4830 to amend the land use bylaw.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion or comments? Seeing none, we'll vote.
I vote no.
Thank you, Councillor Sharps. Thank you very much. And also, just a reminder to Managing Director Bohan that Wendy will be awaiting your call regarding the sewer. Thank you. And what else, sorry? Oh, in the back lane, yeah. So we're moving on now to item 12.1, Enterprise Risk Management Policy. Can I have a motion?
I move that council approves the Enterprise Risk Management Policy 0184.
I'll second that.
Any discussion on this policy? Seeing none, we'll vote on approval of the policy.
I vote yes.
Thank you, Councillor Sharps. That's unanimous. And for first reading only, we have bylaw 4793 to amend the Escort Services bylaw.
So I move that council gives first reading to bylaw 4793 to amend the Escort Services bylaw.
I'll second that.
All right, we'll vote. Oh,
Can I make a comment, a question?
I vote yes.
we can, it's first reading, so, yes, go ahead.
Thank you. I guess the question is probably, I think I have the answer for it, but I'd just like to put it out there publicly. It seems to me that this bylaw is something that is of some public concern. And I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to have a public hearing in relation to it so people can voice their I guess their either support or not of this bylaw. I think I do understand that there won't be a public hearing necessarily the way it's set up now, but I think it would be of value. Is there a process for that or no? I guess is my question.
You could make a motion to conduct a non-statutory public hearing, similar to what we did, no, we just sent the off-site levy bylaw. We did it one time recently where we wanted a public hearing on something, it might have been off-site. Then council would have to vote on that. But do you want to do first reading first? Oh, sorry, City Solicitor Bullock, or who are you pointing at? Okay, City Solicitor Bullock.
Thanks through the chair. Yes, there is a process in the procedure bylaw for a non-statutory public hearing. Council could pass a motion and you'd have to establish the date, time, and place of the non-statutory public hearing.
So my question would be, we pass first reading and then would it be done separately or should it be done this evening?
Well,
Or can it be even?
do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I think you could pass first reading and then have a separate vote on the issue of the public hearing.
Yeah, so ordinarily we just do first reading and then, yeah, okay. Councillor Knodel?
Thank you, Mayor Clark. Just generally curious, is the change to this bylaw substantive enough that having public contribution would allow for weighing in on something that there's going to be a change in outcome?
If I may, but Councillor McGrogan, you may want to speak to this as well. I think there are concerns not just with the change, but the bylaw itself. Councillor McGrogan?
Yeah, thank you. So I have a concerned citizen, I guess, that feels that the bylaw itself is really, I haven't met with him yet, that it's materially wrong. And I know that, I actually think that I'd like to hear from that person and see where, what we should do with it, because it really, there's no use, because you're kind of wrong in a bylaw, doesn't mean you have to adjust it, but it still be wrong. So that's the discussion I'd love to have with council, and I'm giving an opportunity for the public. But I guess it's separate than first reading. I'm prepared to vote on first reading. And it may be that council doesn't want to do that, and I'm fine with that too. It's the will of council.
So I think how this will roll out, if you wanted to make that motion, is we'll do first reading, and then you can make a motion to put it to a public hearing, a non-statutory public hearing.
Can I ask a clarifying
go
question?
ahead.
Thank you so much. Through the chair, perhaps to city manager, perhaps to city manager, oh geez. No, it's past 9 o'clock, my brain's gone to sleep. To Councillor McGrogan, so just to understand, again, I'm looking, and maybe I'm just thinking too far ahead. So if there's, if this document is wrong, would the person be looking to remove the bylaw? Like, is that, okay. And
well,
okay, I'm just a little concerned that I won't have enough information to make a decision just with a public hearing. Would there be a briefing note that would come forward in conjunction with, because I need more information than just like the public coming forward. A city manager's got her hand up.
So the briefing note with relation to this Escort bylaw is in our agenda today. And then we would have to, so this is an amendment bylaw. So passing that bylaw wouldn't get rid of the Escort bylaw, we would have to bring that back again to have a bylaw that repeals the initial bylaw.
May I respond?
Yep.
Through the chair. I understand that element. What I'm looking for is there a staff recommendation? Is there logic around a repeal, not just community, like, what is the functional impact of getting rid of a bylaw like this on the community? Is it required, and city manager is putting up her hand. So that's what I'm not so much worried about process per se, but as long as there's context when we come forward, if we do decide that we're going to do a public hearing, I need accompanying information that is beyond what is sitting here and is complementary to the conversation yes, anyways, city manager.
I have Councillor McGrogan first and then the city manager.
Thank you. I think we're making an assumption that the bylaw needs to be repealed in its entirety. I just think that this particular individual thinks that well, I don't know exactly what he thinks. I haven't met with him, but he was hoping for an opportunity to speak to the bylaw. So my question is just, and I might not agree with him in any way, but I just think if it is of some public interest, we could consider hearing him. And there might be a different and a better way to do it. It might be just through a briefing note from him to council prior to us doing second and third reading. I just want to surface it now and not just have this march forward until it's too late to go into reverse. Thank you.
I'm going to go to City Manager Mitchell and then I'll come back to you, Councillor Knodel.
Thank you, through the chair. Just being mindful of the fact that council should be making decisions on the whole for the good of the whole community, but also this has been a hot topic, I would say, and there has been a lot of conversation back and forth. I don't see the harm in a public hearing, public meeting, but one thing that we have to be very cautious of as administration is we have to give council the best advice so that you can make these hard decisions. So if we do have a public meeting, then it would be prudent for us to go back, like anything that comes forward to you. For example, we had 2 presentations today. We should never be making recommendations until we have time to go back, consider all those comments from the public meeting, and then bring a re-informed briefing note. So if we do go ahead with a public meeting, I would ask that administration have time to take that back. We heard at DNI that Medicine Hat Police and the enforcement arm, that this is a safety issue, more of bylaw to keep those in that profession safe. And I think that's an important piece of the package that would need to be brought forward as well, but we'd need time after the public meeting to collate that. Thank you.
Did that answer your question? Okay. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, through the chair. My last comment is I don't want to create a standard that if we have a frustrated single human, that it becomes a non-statutory public hearing if we're not provided that information ahead of time to peruse. And that's all I want to say, and thank you.
Thank you very much. And I will note that there are members of council who have expressed concerns previously about this, so maybe that's as City Manager Mitchell said, it's a hot enough topic that if someone makes the motion, we can deal with that then. But do you want to get first reading on the table?
I did.
Oh, did we? Yes. Oh, my apology. We didn't vote on it. No. Yeah, sorry. Yes, I see you. Go ahead, City Manager Mitchell.
Thank you, through the chair. And I did neglect to say there are other manners of getting feedback without doing a public meeting, so that's another option.
Sure. We'll vote on first reading. Councillor Sharps, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Thank you. Councillor McGrogan?
Yeah, thanks for the airtime here, and I thank you for that, because I'm not saying that it has to be a public hearing. I just think the public have a right to be heard through whatever vehicle. So it might be a briefing note. that just informs council of a concern, and then we can make a decision from there. So I'm not suggesting that we have a public hearing, but I'm suggesting that the public be heard.
So you're not making a motion at this time?
You know, I'm not going to. I'm going to meet with the one subject that I know of, and I'll talk with council, and we'll pick a route. So I could still, when's second and third reading? Is it next meeting?
We can make a motion. Ordinarily, it would automatically come back to the next meeting, but we could make a motion to postpone second reading until an alternate date if necessary. Councillor Van Dyke.
Yes, thank you. I did just want to make a comment to this. So I understand the idea of wanting to hear from the public, but I think that by having a first reading and then having the break before you come to second and third reading, we're giving the public opportunity to be in touch with us by phone call or emails or you know, the council contact form, any way they feel that they want to reach out to us. I agree that if we did choose to go to a public hearing, we would want to wait and get feedback from administration, particularly the solicitor's office, because this has a lot of legal parameters to it that could complicate things. And I think that in having potentially a public hearing, there's a lot of things that might not be obvious to the public or even to council, and it might be not easier, that's not the right word. It might not cloud the issue so much if we allow people to come through the regular avenues of communication.
Contact council forum?
Yes.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, Councillor McGrogan?
Thank you. I heard and appreciate the conversation. So what I would hope that we could do is postpone the second and third reading till the meeting after. If I don't know if I need a motion for that or not, but like I said, I'm very good with other means of communication in relation to this.
The meeting after being the next meeting that we have, or first meeting in December? Okay, well, we probably need a motion for that. Councillor Robbins?
Yeah, I was just going to say that unless this is a pressing matter, it should go to the new year, because we have to do a budget before December 31st. And if we put a public, I'm interested to see what other people say if there's a motion. So I'm not going to say what my opinion is at the moment, because I haven't heard everyone to have fully formed it. But if there was going to be a public hearing, how are we going to get the budget done? So if we're going to even consider that, the second and third reading should go to January, I think, because we're going to run out of time for budget and other things that always crams us at the end of the year. So if it's not pressing, then I think it should wait till the new year.
Is anyone making a motion? Councillor Van Dyke.
Sorry if I may, through the chair, ask a question. The main change in this bylaw is really the rates and fees associated with the license, and we typically pass those in November and December for the January 1st business fees. So that is a bit of a timeline that we would want to look at, I think.
Okay, so we've discussed a possible motion to postpone, motion to do a public hearing. Councillor Robbins.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, I was going to say I can't imagine that the fees changes are such a significant part of our budget. We couldn't deal with it in the new year. But
Gonna need a motion, or we're at the end of our agenda. Okay, no one is making a motion, so we've just given first reading. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, I didn't press the button, but if Councilor McGrogan is prepared to make a motion, I would second it. I think hearing everyone's talk, I mean, and the concern around the public, non-statutory public hearing going this way or that, the reality of the matter would be no different than the discussion we had where I disagreed and you agreed with a land use change. The motion would be before us and we would either support it or be against it. The public at any time, that we would be certainly creating a vehicle for opinion, but at any time has the right to create conversation or petition a council and persuade them. So I don't think having a public hearing or a non-statutory public hearing would lead to the confusion or chaos that we might think it would automatically happen. At the same time, I think, Councilor McGrogan, I think you're on the right track from the standpoint of public interest. We can pretend one way or the other, but as soon as you have an Escort bylaw on the agenda, it's going to garner public attention. It did when it was first brought here. I was here, and it will again. But neglecting to give the attention it probably desires or needs is also a form of abdication of our responsibilities to the public. We're not saying that, but so I'm in support of you. If you're willing to make that motion, I'd second it.
There's also a motion that's been put up on the screen regarding just postponing the second reading of the bylaws to allow public comment through the ordinary channels. I'm gonna need a motion.
I'm going to make a motion that council postpone second and third reading of bylaw 4793 to the December 2nd regular city council meeting.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll vote.
I vote yes.
Thank you, Councillor Sharps. Okay, so that passes, and there are no notices of motion in the agenda. And are there any council member reports? Seeing none, does anyone object to adjourning the meeting? Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned at 9:54 p.m.